Chapter 1244. Yi Chen's pupils shrank. Wuling old ancestor was already dead. He didn't know if the five-element space was still there. As for the puppet true God's will, it was obviously not an inanimate object. Thinking about it, it made sense. The will of a true God was not something mortals could imagine. It was not wrong to say that it was one of the billions of incarnations of a true God. The illusory figure, which had become a bit more solid, looked at the Yellow Springs Tempest. His gaze ignored everything and directly looked at Yi Chen. "Interesting little fellow. You actually awakened the netherworld divine eyes. With this pair of eyes, you are like half the master of hell. The four failed puppets inside the five-element space should be your friends, right? Here you go." The shadow stretched out his right hand and opened it. A five-colored ball of light slowly floated towards Yi Chen. "I have already unlocked the puppet secret technique on them. Being refined into puppets is good for them and bad for them. The good is that the mysteries of the five elements are imprinted in the depths of their souls. The bad is that there is still a trace of this person's will hidden in the depths of their souls. One day, when this will is strong enough, it is not impossible for it to possess their souls." Yi Chen nodded. Indeed, as the shadow had said, being refined into a puppet allowed him to know some mysteries of the five elements. In the future, it would be much easier to create supreme techniques related to the five elements. However, he did not understand why the shadow did not kill him. Wasn't he summoned by Wuling old ancestor? Although Wuling old ancestor had already been killed by him. The shadow seemed to know Yi Chen's question. "Come out. These three yellow spring storms are mine." Hearing this, Yi Chen thought that it was like that. Wuling old ancestor did not know that he was in the yellow spring storm, so the purpose of summoning the puppet true God's will was to refine the yellow spring storm into a puppet. The puppet true God knew that Yi Chen was in the yellow spring storm, but for some reason, it did not make things difficult for Yi Chen. Holding the five-element space in his hand, Yi Chen walked out of the yellow spring storm. The illusory figure waved his hand, and the three yellow spring storms fused together, becoming an even larger one. Shortly after, this yellow spring storm began to compress, fusing with the illusory figure. In the end, a primal chaos illusory figure appeared, but its eyes were still empty. Crackle. In the instant that all of this was completed, the sky suddenly crackled with lightning. The lightning was pitch black, and a powerful voltage was applied to Yi Chen's body. Yi Chen felt his body go numb, and his soul was on the verge of collapsing. Not good. What kind of lightning is this? Yi Chen hurriedly flew far away to avoid being affected. It was obvious that the pitch-black lightning was directed at the puppet true God's will and had nothing to do with him. Even the apocalyptic thunderbolt has appeared. "Don't worry, I won't challenge your authority." The chaotic shadow took a step forward and disappeared from this world. As the chaotic shadow left, the black lightning also gradually disappeared as if nothing had happened. The five-elemental space belonged to Wuling Forefather. When Wuling Forefather died, the soul imprint on it became much weaker. Without much effort, Yi Chen erased the soul imprint that belonged to Wuling Forefather and replaced it with his own. What happened? Ancestor Wuling is dead. The moment they were released, the Scarlet Wind Emperor and the others asked with lingering fear. Yi Chen nodded and explained what happened next. "That was close. Fortunately, that old guy is dead. Otherwise, we'd be under his control for the rest of our lives. Yeah, it was really too dangerous this time. A paragon is indeed a paragon. He simply couldn't resist. Our strength is far from enough." The Scarlet Wind Emperor's face was gloomy. Anyone who almost became a puppet for the rest of their lives would be in a bad mood, not to mention that the Scarlet Wind Emperor was a dignified emperor. Stone Emperor said, "Supreme Holy Land will open in 80 years. At that time, as long as one is at the 8th layer of life and death realm, they can enter. We'll strive to reach the 8th layer within 80 years and enter the Supreme Holy Land together." That's right. Supreme Holy Land usually opens once every 10,000 years. This time, it's 2,000 years early. If we miss this chance, the next time will be 10,000 years later. The Fire Sparrow Emperor nodded. Yi Chen said, "Supreme Holy Land opens in 80 years. He hadn't heard anything about Supreme Holy Land. Snow Air Emperor explained, Supreme Holy Land is the graveyard of deceased paragons. Almost all the deceased paragons of the 4 great life starfields are inside. Due to the special rules of Supreme Holy Land, the corpses of paragons will not decay, and their chi and blood will not deteriorate. Their bodies still contain powerful energy and will. If one can obtain the inheritance of a paragon, it can save countless years of hard work. Scarlet Wind Emperor continued, the closer one gets to the center of Supreme Holy Land, the more powerful the pressure of a paragon becomes. Ordinary emperors can only seek opportunities in the periphery, and only the truly powerful emperors can enter. It's said that there are many corpses of supreme paragons in the center of Supreme Holy Land. There are even corpses of paragons who dominated an era. Yi Chen nodded. The corpses of paragons from ancient to modern times were all inside, so there were bound to be some heaven-defying paragons. However, he didn't know what the inheritance of a paragon was. If he accepted the inheritance, he would have no choice but to walk the path of the paragons. If it was only a kind of power that could be transformed into his own in the future, Yi Chen could accept it. After all, even if he wasn't powerful, others would be powerful. Moreover, power was power. It was very simple. From birth, people began to learn other people's things. Let's leave this place first. Hell was too dangerous. Even paragons were in a precarious situation here, not to mention them. Yi Chen didn't expect to obtain any treasures here. He only wanted to find the exit as soon as possible. In order not to drag Yi Chen down, the 4 entered the 5-element space again. After a week, Yi Chen returned to the foot of the Crying Ghost Mountain. Originally, with Yi Chen's strength, it was impossible for him to come out alive. However, he had the Netherworld Sacred Eye. Ordinary ghosts were completely suppressed. Even that ghost beast, which was comparable to a 2nd-level mountain ghost, couldn't do anything to Yi Chen. Every time it pounced on him, it would be dispirited and listless by the Netherworld Sacred Eye's hell will. Hey, one came out. So weak. On the guest platform, the eyes of the skull flickered endlessly. Yi Chen walked over and sized up the skull. After confirming that the other party could think, he asked, "Do you know where the exit to hell is?" "Why should I tell you? Unless you give me 50 ghost stones." "Sure. Give me the ghost stones first. Tell me first, then I'll give them to you." "Fine, if you lie to me, I'll swallow you alive." The skull didn't believe that Yi Chen would play any tricks. Although it was bound here, if it wanted to swallow a puny human, it was too easy. It couldn't do anything to those quasi-venerables from before. Walk 50 billion li in that direction, and there'll be an exit. As for whether it's the entrance you came in from, I don't know. Are you sure? Yi Chen was a little skeptical. Hand over the 50 ghost stones. The eyes of the skull burned fiercely. I don't dare to confirm whether what you said is true or not. How about this, when I confirm it's true, I'll give it to you. Yi Chen turned and flew in the direction indicated by the skull. You're courting death. The skull was furious. It opened its pitch-black mouth, and a pitch-black storm swept toward Yi Chen. Facing the pitch-black storm, a golden light flashed in Yi Chen's eyes. The storm suddenly dissipated, and a terrifying hell will rushed toward the skull. The skull screamed, and the fire in its eyes dimmed. How is this possible? This is the Netherworld Sacred Eye. You're a human, how can you have the Netherworld Sacred Eye? I hope what you said is true. Otherwise, you know the consequences. Yi Chen's figure flashed, and he instantly disappeared. The exit is naturally true, but every exit is guarded by Netherworld ghosts. You can't leave. No, he has the Netherworld Sacred Eye, why would he be afraid of Netherworld ghosts? For a moment, the skull was extremely distressed. Chapter 1245. This exit is indeed real. With the Netherworld Sacred Eye, Yi Chen could easily see whether the exit was real or fake. As for the nether ghosts guarding the exit, he directly ignored them. As long as they weren't grade 2 mountain ghosts or above, no ghost was a threat to him. As for grade 3 mountain ghosts, They were at best a ferocious beast. It would be difficult to defeat them, but it wouldn't take too much effort to get rid of them. With a flash, Yi Chen escaped into the hazy passageway. At the end of the passageway, a black figure was faintly discernible. Behind him was a white barrier with flowing water waves and threatening cold air. Just as the black figure was about to attack Yi Chen, a golden light flashed, and the black figure instantly turned into nothingness. Pop! Yi Chen passed through the white barrier. So cold. Is this the depths of the heavenly river? Yi Chen had experienced this kind of cold in the depths of the heavenly river, and it got colder the deeper he went. The calm water contained the changes of time and space. Without enough strength, it was impossible to find the way out. This was a huge island, and in the center of the island was a lake. Suddenly, a pillar of water erupted from the center of the lake, and a figure broke out of the water. The figure was Yi Chen. So it's the lake of the island. After looking around for a while, Yi Chen understood. It was obvious that this place was similar to the volcanic island, an entrance to hell. After leaving hell, Yi Chen released the Scarlet Wind Emperor and the others. We're out. The outside world is still the best. The Scarlet Wind Emperor heaved a sigh of relief and smiled. The Snow Air Emperor hesitated. I don't know if this is a grade 5 tributary. If not, it'll be even more difficult to leave the Heavenly River. Although the grade 5 tributary of the Heavenly River was vast and boundless, it was still possible to leave in 3 to 5 years. If one was lucky, 1 or 2 years would be enough. If it was a grade 4 tributary, it would take at least 10 times more time. If it was a grade 3 tributary, or even a grade 2 tributary, or even the main branch, it wasn't a matter of time. If one's realm wasn't high enough, they wouldn't be able to leave for a lifetime. Legend had it that ordinary supremes would be trapped for countless years if they entered the main branch of the Heavenly River, unless they reached a profound realm in the profound meaning of time and space. It doesn't matter. This is still a 5th grade tributary. I can see the boundary at the edge of the Heavenly River. As for how far the Netherworld Sacred Eye could see, Yi Chen didn't have a concrete idea. However, compared to the Soul Eye, the Netherworld Sacred Eye's ability was more than 1,000,000 times stronger. Millions of li could only be seen within a few inches, while the Soul Eye's range was only 1,000,000,000 li. It could be said that the Netherworld Sacred Eye itself had the property of space and time. Combined with Yi Chen's perfect space profound, the range of his vision was unimaginable. After spending half a year, Yi Chen's group of 5 finally left the Sky River and arrived in outer space. This was mainly because the space-time in the Heavenly River was ever-changing. Sometimes, it could be sped up, and sometimes, it would be slowed down. We're finally out. At this moment, the 5 of them felt as if a lifetime had passed. The Heavenly River was still too dangerous for them. Being able to come out alive could be said to be a stroke of luck. However, they wouldn't be so lucky every time. This time, if not for Yi Chen, they would have all become puppets, living a life worse than death. Emperor Dao's spirit root belongs to the fated. I won't think about it anymore. This time, I'll go into closed-door training. I won't come out until I break through to the 8th layer. Another few months passed, and the 5 arrived at White Tiger Starfield. Stone Emperor bid farewell to the 4. Next, Fire Sparrow Emperor, Scarlet Wind Emperor, and Snow Air Emperor also bid farewell to Yi Chen. Supreme Holy Land's opening was imminent. Apart from Scarlet Wind Emperor, the others all wanted to break through to the 8th layer within 80 years. Scarlet Wind Emperor was also not satisfied with his current strength, so he also wanted to increase his strength after returning. Finally, only Yi Chen was left. 8th layer life and death realm. No rush. I'll first digest the mysteries of the 5 elements' power. Although there were still 80 years before the opening of Supreme Holy Land, which was not enough time for anyone, Yi Chen wasn't in a hurry to increase his cultivation base. He had to wait until his foundation was solid enough and he had a 100% chance of breaking through. Right now, the most important thing was to digest the mysteries of old ancestor Wu Ling's 5 elements power. The sooner he could comprehend it, the sooner he could create his own supreme 5 elements sword art. Hell Ghost Whale Mountain, Old Man Yin Yang, Grandma Night Ghost, Vigorous Ancestor, and Golden Light Ancestor followed in Old Ancestor Wuling's footsteps and were all annihilated. Of course, Old Ancestor Wuling was killed by the true god puppet's will, while the others died under the endless Yellow Springs tempest. This was merely the 41st floor. Nobody knew what kind of dangers lay in the 42nd to the 49th floor. Perhaps, this place was originally a forbidden area of hell. The will of the puppet true god, the only one who could enter and leave freely and no one could stop him, had no interest in this place. He had already gone to an unknown place. There was no one in the world who could detect the traces of the true god's will, even if it was just the remnant will left behind by the puppet true god. 50 years passed in the blink of an eye. On a desolate planet near planet Flaming Star in the Vermilion Birdstar region, a destructive sword aura erupted into the sky. Everything in its path was shattered and annihilated. Doomsday Calamity. After spending 50 years, Yi Chen finally created his own supreme sword art, Doomsday Calamity. Fusing 4 types of profoundness and fusing 5 types of mutually reinforcing and restraining profoundness were not on the same level. The latter was hundreds or thousands of times more difficult. Even with Yi Chen's comprehension ability and Old Ancestor Wuling's 5 elements power, it took Yi Chen a full 50 years. Doomsday Calamity, which contained the power of the 5 elements, was thousands of times more powerful than the Doomsday Meteor Sword. At this moment, Yi Chen finally had the strength to fight against a quasi-venerable. Of course, although he had created Doomsday Calamity, it was far from reaching perfection. Fusing 5 types of mutually reinforcing and restraining profoundness was too difficult. A mere 50 years was not enough. Yi Chen could only fuse a little bit of it, which was only the tip of the iceberg. Even Old Ancestor Wuling's 5 elements palm technique was only the tip of the iceberg. Apart from Supremes, almost no one could comprehend a supreme martial art to perfection. Back in the Dragon Race, Yi Chen had seen the image of the green-robed emperor in the image recording crystal. Although it was not a supreme martial art but a 5th revolution martial art that contained the 5 profoundness of metal, wood, water, fire, and wind, the green-robed emperor had fused these 5 profoundness to a very high degree. This was much more powerful than Old Ancestor Wuling's 5 elements palm technique. A supreme martial art was an extremely difficult path. On the contrary, 5th revolution martial arts and 6th revolution martial arts could improve much faster. However, one's potential was limited. Which one to choose depended on the individual's situation. After 50 years, my foundation has more or less solidified. But, it's still not enough. I haven't reached the critical point yet. 50 years of cultivation had made Yi Chen's foundation incomparably firm. At this moment, he had 80 to 90% chance of breaking through. If it were someone else, they would have already started breaking through. However, Yi Chen had higher requirements for himself. His goal was not only the 8th life and death realm, but also the 9th life and death realm. One wrong step, and every step would be wrong. He would not make such a mistake. Chapter 1246. Time flew by, and time was merciless. In the blink of an eye, 30 years had passed. There was only 1 or 2 years left before the opening of the Supreme Holy Land. On this day, Yi Chen sensed something in his heart. The sword yuan inside his body was showing signs of palpitating. It was time to break through. In the past 80 years, Yi Chen had 100% certainty of reaching the 8th sky of life and death realm. No one would believe it. It should be known that reaching the 8th sky of life and death realm was 100 times harder than reaching the 7th. Without hundreds or thousands of years of accumulation, it would be impossible to solidify one's foundation. However, sometimes, geniuses could not be judged with common sense. If every genius needed a lot of time to increase their cultivation base, then they would not be geniuses. Moreover, the reason why Yi Chen could have 100% certainty of reaching the 8th sky of life and death realm in the past 80 years was mainly because he had created a supreme sword art. The improvement of his martial arts realm allowed Yi Chen's mental state to become more perfect. With a perfect mental state, his cultivation base would naturally become more stable. In addition, the utilization of the 5 elements also allowed the human body's yin and yang 5 elements to reach an absolute balance, which could also greatly solidify one's foundation. I wonder how many yuan stones would it take to reach the 8th sky of life and death realm? The only thing Yi Chen was worried about was whether he had enough yuan stones. Reaching the 7th sky of life and death realm consumed 300 million yuan stones. Reaching the 8th sky of life and death realm would not be as simple as 10 times. Under normal circumstances, the cultivation base of the 8th sky of life and death realm would be 10 times that of the 7th sky of life and death realm, and the purity would be several times higher. However, what Yi Chen had was Sword Yuan, which was several times purer than Jin Yuan. Multiplying the two, it would be more than 100 times, which was a frightening number. Without breaking through immediately, Yi Chen began to prepare the yuan stones. 3 days later, the yuan stones in Yi Chen's storage ring had reached 40 billion. 12 billion came from the yuan stone pond. In the past 80 years, the pond could produce 100 million yuan stones every year. Once it reached 10 billion, Yi Chen would take it out, lest it couldn't produce any more. Another 28 billion and 10 billion came from the flame planet's taxes. Indeed, the entire planet now belonged to Yi Chen. Yi Chen's actions in the God Paradise were seen by the upper echelons of the human race. Rewarding a third-grade life planet was not a big deal. On the contrary, if there was nothing at all, it would be unreasonable. Flame Star's annual tax revenue was more than 100 million. Including other income, the total revenue was almost 200 million. 30% was paid to the human race's upper echelons, and the remaining 70% was still more than 100 million. After 80 years, it wouldn't be difficult to reach 10 billion. As for the last 18 billion, he had made a trip to a 6th-grade life planet. In the past few years, he had obtained a lot of treasures, some of which he couldn't use, so he put them up for auction. 18 billion was only half of the total value. The other half would only be given to him after the end of the auction. That should be enough. 40 billion yuan stones was a shocking number. It was simply unimaginable for those under the 7th layer of life and death realm. Even if they didn't eat or drink for their entire lives, they wouldn't be able to earn this much. Getting rid of all distracting thoughts, Yi Chen entered seclusion to break through to the next realm. Breaking through to the 8th layer of life and death realm was much more powerful than breaking through to the 7th layer. To a certain extent, breaking through to the 8th layer was almost a heaven-defying move. The universe also had life, and the life inside his body was nurtured by him. When he was weak, he could increase his strength very quickly. But, once he reached a certain level, his improvement would become slower and slower. After all, the universe wouldn't allow him to become infinitely stronger. Otherwise, the universe itself wouldn't be able to bear it. Why did the universe have no true gods? It was probably because the true gods had surpassed the limits of the universe. Around the desolate planet, lightning flashed, and the dark clouds that shrouded countless planets gradually converged. Is someone breaking through to the 8th layer? The commotion caused by Yi Chen's breakthrough was too great, and could be seen from millions of li away. If an ordinary heavenly tribulation was a heavenly tribulation on a planet, then this one was a cosmic heavenly tribulation. When breaking through to the life and death realm from the Sea of Soul realm, there would be a heavenly tribulation. Afterwards, every time one made a breakthrough, there would be a chance of being sensed by the heavenly tribulation. Although the heavenly tribulation was frightening, many people yearned for its arrival, because its arrival meant that one's strength was powerful enough to attract the attention of the heavens. In fact, every time Yi Chen broke through in the past, there would be a heavenly tribulation. However, those heavenly tribulations were too weak, and were directly turned into Yuan Qi by Yi Chen and refined into his Zhen Yuan. The reason why this heavenly tribulation was so powerful was due to 2 reasons. First, the 8th layer of life and death realm was different from the 7th layer. It was getting closer and closer to the limits of the universe. Second, Yi Chen's accumulation was too deep. Soul Power, Sword Yuan, and Netherworld Saint Ai, which one of them wasn't a heaven-defying existence? Who knew whether breaking through to the 8th layer of life and death realm would cause a huge increase in strength and cause a chain reaction? Someone from the human race is about to break through to the 8th layer. Let's go and take a look. Last time, the emperors of the Demons Alliance failed to kill Yi Chen, and instead suffered heavy casualties. However, this didn't stop the Demons Alliance from assassinating him. They absolutely wouldn't allow a peerless genius to grow, even if they had to pay a certain price. Last time, it was a mid-grade emperor, but this time, it was peak emperor level, and even 3 demigods. They had been in Vermilion Bird Starfield for less than half a year. After all, sneaking into human territory was extremely dangerous. If they were sensed, not only would they fail the mission, they would also be unable to escape even if they grew wings. The supremes of the human race could sense a boundless distance with a single sweep of their soul power. The 3 demigods were all old men nearing the end of their lifespans. They had no hope of breaking through, and were the best candidates for this mission. Moreover, the higher-ups had promised them that if they could complete the mission, they would be rewarded with some lifespan-increasing treasures. Normally, they wouldn't even dare to think about it. Although demigods weren't cabbages, there were still quite a few of them. Moreover, there were only so many lifespan-increasing treasures. The movement speed of demigods was extremely fast. After a few teleportations, they arrived at the center of the heavenly tribulation. An 8th layer life and death tribulation was nothing in their eyes. It's that kid. A black light flickered in one of the demigods' eyes, revealing a shocked expression. They couldn't imagine how many years it had been, yet the kid already had the confidence to attack 8th layer life and death realm. As far as they were concerned, Yi Chen had at least 70 to 80% chance of breaking through. Otherwise, he wouldn't have chosen to do so. This kid is too frightening. Once he becomes an 8th layer life and death heavenly sovereign, killing him will be difficult. Seems like the heavens are still looking out for our Demons Alliance. He doesn't have a protector by his side. Killing him now will be as easy as flipping one's hand. 3 demigods and 8 peak emperors. Such a lineup was practically invincible under the Supremes. Even if they encountered a peak demigod, they would still have the power to fight. Kill. A demigod with a head full of serpent hair flickered out, his body brimming with killing intent. When he reappeared, he was already on Yi Chen's planet. This demons was once a famous figure among the demons. He was called Myriad Snake Demonic Ancestor, not inferior to Old Ancestor Wuling. Die. With a sudden wave of his right hand, countless serpent phantoms charged at Yi Chen, containing the 5 profounds of gold, water, wind, shadow, and poison. Weaker opponents would immediately be sucked dry by this myriad snake annihilation palm. Chapter 1247. Destroy. With just one sword strike, Yi Chen destroyed the countless snake shadows of the snake demon ancestor. The moment the doomsday calamity was born, Yi Chen already had the strength to fight against Wuling Old Ancestor. Although the snake demon ancestor was strong, he wasn't stronger than Wuling Old Ancestor. Just the aftermath of the destructive sword gleam was enough to split the planet in half. Lava spurted out like flying flames, and the universe was illuminated. Supreme sword technique. The snake demon ancestor shouted and hurriedly dodged the remnant sword gleam. There were also strong and weak supreme martial arts. For the same profoundness, creativity determined the strength. For example, some people could only build rough houses, while others could use the same materials to build exquisite houses. Similarly, the snake demon ancestor himself had a 5th revolution martial art. Although his future potential was far inferior to a supreme martial art, for now, the progress of a supreme martial art was too slow. On the contrary, a 5th revolution martial art was easier to develop and improve. Therefore, as long as the degree of integration of profoundness wasn't too deep, the snake demon ancestor didn't fear a supreme martial art. Of course, he wasn't just shocked by the doomsday calamity. He was even more shocked by the sword intent of this sword, which faintly showed signs of ignoring all defenses. This was a phenomenon that could only occur with a 9th grade sword intent. An ordinary 9th grade sword intent was already the limit. Compared to a peak 9th grade sword intent, there was only a difference in quantity and control. The difference in quality was very small. The opponent's sword intent was the destruction sword intent. An 8th grade destruction sword intent was equivalent to an ordinary 9th grade sword intent. In other words, the opponent's sword intent was about to break through to the 8th grade. Rumble. At this moment, lightning as thick as a mountain struck down from the boundless dark clouds. Without exception, all of these lightning bolts shot toward Yi Chen. With powerful enemies outside and a heavenly tribulation inside, Yi Chen was undoubtedly in an abyss of suffering. However, Yi Chen didn't care. The sword energy in his body was gradually transforming into an even stronger sword energy. As long as he could endure this period, even if 3 more quasi-venerables came, they wouldn't be a match for him. 10 billion, 20 billion, 30 billion. In a short period of time, Yi Chen had already used up 30 billion source stones, and in exchange, he had nowhere to vent the energy in his body. This kind of energy was too vast, and in a short period of time, Yi Chen had no way to completely refine it. The arrival of the heavenly tribulation was the perfect time to temper this powerful energy, and the appearance of a powerful enemy could also vent a portion of the uncontrollable energy, making his breakthrough even smoother. Everything was under Yi Chen's control. Demonic ancestor Myriad Snake, why are you going soft? Watch me. Another quasi-venerable charged at Yi Chen. He was Divine Emperor Hulk of the Green Man race, and he cultivated the profound meaning of power. He punched out, causing the void to undulate as if it had turned into a tidal wave, crashing towards Yi Chen. This was God Emperor Hulk's clear sky fist. In the face of quasi-venerable Hulk's ultimate move, Yi Chen also slashed out with his sword. Puff! The berserk fist energy split the tidal wave in two. The destructive sword intent contained within Doomsday Calamity was enough to split and tear apart everything. Even the profound of power couldn't stop it. Of course, a sword move that could contend against a quasi-venerable naturally consumed a lot of sword yuan. Before breaking through, Yi Chen could only use it twice. After that, his sword yuan would be exhausted. However, now that he was about to enter the 8th layer of life and death realm, his sword yuan was not only more vigorous, but also purer. Using Doomsday Calamity a dozen times wouldn't be a problem. Once he broke through, he would be able to use it dozens of times. As far as Yi Chen was concerned, the true problem was the universe's heavenly tribulation. The heavenly tribulation contained the universe's will, and even Yi Chen couldn't completely disperse it. A portion of the tribulation's power would always land on Yi Chen's body, creating a large amount of sparks. If not for his 7th step spirit body containing immortal power, Yi Chen wouldn't even need to be assassinated. He would have been the first to succumb to the heavenly tribulation's might and be on the verge of death. It could be said that if one wanted to break through to the 8th layer of life and death realm, their spirit body couldn't be too weak. Demon ancestor Myriad Snake deity Emperor Hulk and the other quasi-venerables' faces turned ugly. Myriad Snake ancestor said, "This kid is a monstrous genius. We can't use common sense to calculate him. We can only take advantage of his heavenly tribulation to join hands and kill him. Right, this kid is much more monstrous than the geniuses of my clan." Deity Emperor Hulk was no longer as relaxed as before. His face was filled with solemnity and killing intent. The 8 of you also join hands to attack him. Make sure he can't wholeheartedly resist the heavenly tribulation. Myriad Snake ancestor turned around and ordered the 8 Apex Emperors. Yes. The leading Apex Emperor sucked in a deep breath and looked at Yi Chen with disbelief. Although the heavenly tribulation was constantly destroying Yi Chen's body, it was also tempering the sword yuan within Yi Chen's body. Again and again, it was as if it was forging a peerless sword. The universe's will within the heavenly tribulation was tempering Yi Chen's soul and sword soul. Only the hell's will was hidden in the depths of his soul, not receiving the tempering. Kill. 2 torrents charged at Yi Chen like 2 apocalyptic demonic dragons. The thicker one was the joint attack of demon ancestor Myriad Snake and divine Emperor Hulk. The 3 of them combined their strength, and although it was not a perfect fusion, its power was at least 2 or 3 times stronger. The thinner one was the joint attack of 8 peak-level martial emperors. Its destructive power was also not to be underestimated, and it was equivalent to the all-out attack of a martial emperor. Two apocalyptic demonic dragons, one in front and one in the back, emitted a majestic aura. Yi Chen didn't dare to be careless. He pushed the Immortal Sword Intent and Destruction Sword Intent to the limit. The Immortal Sword Intent protected his body and the Destruction Sword Intent accompanied the Doomsday Disaster to kill the enemy. Whoosh! The vigorous sword radiance tore apart heaven and earth. Even a planet seemed incomparably small in front of this sword radiance, like a speck of dust. The pitch-black starry sky instantly lit up. Rumble! An earth-shattering explosion occurred. The broken planet beneath Yi Chen's feet turned into ashes. The magma instantly extinguished and turned into nothingness. Even the dark clouds that shrouded countless planets were blasted open by the shockwave. Countless bolts of lightning darted back and forth like dragons, interweaving into a net. Myriad Snake Ancestor, Deity Emperor Hulk, the three Quasi-Venerables, and the 8 Apex Emperors were all sent flying. Yi Chen's sword was unbelievably powerful. Of course, Yi Chen didn't have it easy either. His hands exploded inch by inch, flesh and blood splattered everywhere. Even the flying heaven sword in his hand was sent flying into the depths of the universe. A good chance. Myriad Snake Ancestors' eyes lit up. An expert's weapon was also a part of their power. If they lost their weapon, their battle prowess would be greatly reduced. Let's work together again. This time, he will die for sure. Deity Emperor Hulk knew that this opportunity couldn't be missed. After a few breaths' time, the two apocalyptic demonic dragons attacked again. This time, Yi Chen was barehanded. He couldn't recall the flying heaven sword for a while. With my heart as a sword, I will cut through everything. Facing a desperate situation in the eyes of ordinary people, Yi Chen didn't flinch or panic. His heart was as tough as steel, and his soul was like a diamond that had been tempered hundreds and thousands of times. Whether or not he had a sword in his hand couldn't affect his emotions. Instead, it could stimulate his power. Having a sword in his heart was enough. Kill. Grasping the air with both hands, Yi Chen slashed out with a sword. This sword wasn't as clear as before, but it was even more unfathomable. It had an indomitable attitude, and nothing in the world could block the sharpness of this sword. In this desperate situation, the two sword intents broke through and reached the 8th rank. Chapter 1248. 8th grade sword intent could already destroy the fabric of spacetime, let alone a supreme 8th grade sword intent. Half-step sovereign sword energy, 8th grade destruction sword intent, supreme sword art doomsday calamity. Even without the flying heaven sword, Yi Chen's current state had already surpassed Wuling Old Ancestor's level. He was confident that he could easily suppress Old Ancestor Wuling if he met him again. The two furious demonic dragons suddenly disintegrated under the invisible sword light, as if they had never existed. All traces of them had been directly erased. Although the invisible sword light dissipated, it didn't disappear. It turned into a boundless sword wind that rushed over Demon Ancestor Myriad Snake and the others. Fart! Demon Ancestor Myriad Snake and God King Hulk spurted out a mouthful of blood. The other 8 peak sovereigns weren't so lucky. Their bodies instantly disintegrated and disappeared like ashes. 8th grade destruction sword intent. God King Hulk said word by word. Fight him. Demon Ancestor Myriad Snake clenched his teeth. If Yi Chen had already finished his tribulation, they would immediately retreat. But the tribulation was only halfway through. He didn't believe that Yi Chen could last much longer. Boom! 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 Thick bolts of lightning struck Yi Chen's body, splitting his skin and muscles. He was bathed in blood, and specks of golden light were faintly discernible in his blood. This was the power of indestructibility. It was said that the 9 transformations golden body was powerful not only because of its powerful defense, but also because it contained several times more indestructibility than others. There were only a few things in the world that could restrain it, and there was only one saint artifact. Boom! A bolt of lightning as thick as a dragon followed the top of Yi Chen's head and struck into his body. All his flesh and bones were instantly penetrated. The next moment, Yi Chen's entire body began to glow, emitting intense light. His eyes even spat out 2 electric snakes. The unbearable pain made Yi Chen grit his teeth, but he still wore a faint smile on his face. His spirit body began to improve. The universe tribulation was tempering him in all aspects, including his soul, sword energy, and spirit body. Not a single one was left out. The heavenly tribulation was both a danger and an opportunity. If one could not overcome it, it could only mean that one's foundation was not strong enough. If one could overcome it, it would be a brand new world. Yi Chen was naturally not afraid of the heavenly tribulation, but there were still the snake demon ancestor and the other 2 quasi-venerables. Sensing Yi Chen's strength, the trio did not hesitate to expend their essence this time to execute a forbidden secret technique. The myriad snake demonic ancestor's glabella was pitch black, with a black vortex in the middle. The vortex spun slowly, and gradually, a small black snake burrowed out. The snake was not corporeal, but it was not illusory either. It looked like it was formed from ink. Only its cold eyes were red, like rubies. God Emperor Hulk continued to gather his energy. His already huge body gradually expanded to around 5 meters tall, turning into a Hulk. The surface of his body was filled with thick green veins that were constantly squirming. It was a disgusting sight. The sound of his heartbeat was like someone beating a planet-sized drum. Thump, 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 it shook the universe and shattered it. The other quasi-venerable was the evil spirit race's old monster, Heavenly Evil. He was preparing an evil technique that could curse powerful quasi-venerables to death. He spat out a mouthful of blood and used it as a guide to draw a complicated talisman pattern in the void. Yi Chen's blood floated within the talisman pattern. This was what he had gathered from the starry sky. Although it was only a small ball, it was enough. Gradually, this small ball of Yi Chen's blood turned into a blood person. He looked exactly the same as Yi Chen, and there was no difference in his expression. If there was someone knowledgeable here, they would definitely be able to tell that this was a curse clone. The so-called curse clone was a kind of spiritual body condensed from curses and the enemy's blood. It had a close connection with the enemy. If the curse clone died, the main body would also be implicated. In serious cases, it might even die. The first to attack was the myriad snake demonic ancestor. That ink-black snake's figure flashed and suddenly disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already in front of Yi Chen and instantly entered Yi Chen's soul sea. Immediately after, Divine Emperor Hulk unleashed the most powerful attack in his life. A fist the size of a water tank swung out, and the violent fist wind was 10 times more terrifying than a cosmic storm. The world seemed to be destroyed in an instant, and the world sank into darkness. Space and time were distorted by the fist pressure. There was no way to dodge this punch, because the fist wind had already enveloped space and time. The last to attack was old monster Heavenly Evil. He concentrated, and the color of his face turned from white to red, from red to green, from green to purple, and finally to white. His finger seemed slow, but it was actually very fast. It hit the blood person in the talisman pattern, and with a poof, the blood person exploded and became nutrients, completely fusing into the talisman pattern. Soon after, the talisman pattern shrank and condensed into a dot. With a flash, it also entered Yi Chen's body. Impossible. The myriad snake demonic ancestor's expression suddenly changed, and he vomited mouthful after mouthful of blood. He was like a critically ill patient, and his expression was extremely dispirited. He had just sensed that his life-bound spirit snake had actually disappeared. This was a part of his soul, and it contained the origin of his soul. It wasn't as simple as pure soul force. Now that the life-bound spirit snake had disappeared, the foundation of his soul was injured. Not to mention that he wouldn't be able to recover for the rest of his life, his soul reserve had also dropped to the level of a titled monarch, no longer a quasi-sovereign. Old monster Heavenly Evil's expression also changed. He was in an even worse state than the myriad snake demonic ancestor. His entire body started to rot from the inside out, and stinky pus splattered everywhere. Even his undying body and undying energy couldn't stop this trend, and could only slow it down. The curse actually backfired. What was going on? Old monster Heavenly Evil didn't manage to curse Yi Chen, so he lost his target, and the curse completely rebounded on him. A curse that could kill a powerful quasi-sovereign wasn't that simple. This kind of power was a double-edged sword. If it couldn't injure the enemy, it would injure the user. Only a supreme could expel it, or the evil god sacrificial altar could absorb the power of the curse. The only thing that was effective was the Hulk God King's terrifying fist wind. Yi Chen was directly sent flying, and more cracks appeared on his body. It could only be said that the myriad snake demonic ancestor and old monster Heavenly Evil's luck was too bad. The thing that Yi Chen feared the least was strange attacks. Not to mention the fact that his destruction sword soul and immortal sword soul weren't weak, the Hell's Will was even more unfathomable. The myriad snake demonic ancestor's lifebound spirit snake, and old monster Heavenly Evil's curse, were simply sending themselves to their deaths in front of the Hell's Will. Roar. A world-shaking roar resounded. Yi Chen, who was sent flying, stopped his retreat. He clenched his fists and fiercely sucked in a breath of air. This breath of air lasted for a very long time, so long that it formed a storm in the starry sky. The storm grew larger and larger, and finally affected the tribulation clouds above. Crackle. Countless lightning bolts were sucked into Yi Chen's body along with the storm. Yi Chen's body grew brighter and more transparent. In the end, the light emitted from Yi Chen's body was even more dazzling than an ordinary sun. His figure could no longer be seen. Has he gone mad? Hulk God King's mouth was wide open. Chapter 1249. Yi Chen naturally didn't go crazy. He was only a fine line away from the 8th layer. As long as he broke through, the heavenly tribulation would naturally vanish. Although devouring a large amount of tribulation lightning was dangerous, it could speed up his breakthrough. If this continued, God Emperor Hulk alone would have the opportunity to kill him. After all, the immortal energy in his body was already running out. Devouring so much tribulation lightning at once was no joke. Yi Chen felt as if his body was melting and evaporating. From the inside to the outside, from his internal organs to the most basic life yuan qi, it was all filled with tribulation lightning. At this moment, Yi Chen's world turned blank, as if there was nothing in it. Break. It seemed like an eternity, but in fact, it was only an instant. Yi Chen's life form suddenly changed, and an extremely frightening pressure erupted, enveloping the heaven and earth. 8th layer life and death realm, complete. All the tribulation lightning within his body was completely refined by Yi Chen, making his 8th layer sword yuan incomparably solid. His spirit body also broke through the peak of the 7th step and reached the early 8th step. If it were anyone else, it would have been impossible. The main reason was that the heavenly tribulation Yi Chen was facing was too powerful, and contained too much of the universe's will. As the saying goes, fortune and misfortune depend on each other. The 7th layer is controlling the body, and the 8th layer is controlling the heaven and earth. The moment he reached the 8th layer, the universe changed in Yi Chen's eyes. Even the space profound became much clearer. No wonder 8th layer life and death heavenly monarchs didn't need space profound to teleport. This control over the heaven and earth allowed them to remove a part of the spatial obstruction. The tribulation clouds enveloping countless planets came and went quickly. As the clouds dispersed, Yi Chen's gaze fell on God Emperor Hulk and the other two. If I don't leave now, then when? God Emperor Hulk didn't care about demon ancestor Myriad Snake and old freak Heavenly Evil. His figure flickered and instantly appeared several billion li away. You think you can escape? As soon as God Emperor Hulk appeared, his forehead was pierced by a sword. He was fast, but Yi Chen was faster. Bang! God Emperor Hulk's body exploded into smithereens, and even his indestructible energy was wiped clean. The 8th heavenly sword energy combined with the 8th step destruction sword intent had completely erased God Emperor Hulk's existence from this world. Opening the netherworld sacred eye, Yi Chen saw the fleeing demonic ancestor Myriad Snake, but he didn't chase after him. Yi Chen's left hand stretched out and retracted, and the spacetime started to distort. A sword pierced through tens of thousands of layers of space. Just like Hulk deity emperor, thousand snake demon ancestor exploded into pieces, and his storage ring and precious emperor-grade artifact instantly appeared in Yi Chen's hand. As for old monster Tian Xie, there was no need for Yi Chen to kill him. He suffered from the backlash of the curse-killing technique and died before the two of them. 3 quasi-sovereigns and 8 top-notch martial emperors had fallen in this battle. Although Yi Chen didn't know exactly how strong he was confident that he wouldn't be afraid of anyone below the supreme being level. Of course, he wouldn't be invincible, but even an invincible quasi-supreme being wouldn't be able to easily suppress him. These 80 years had been an earth-shaking period. Not only had Yi Chen's strength advanced by leaps and bounds, the people of God Paradise had also advanced by leaps and bounds. The majority of the people Yi Chen was familiar with had left God Paradise, because they had all reached the 7th layer of life and death realm. The old had left, and the new had come. Currently, there were only a few people Yi Chen knew in God Paradise. Among the people Yi Chen was familiar with, Arju's achievements were indeed the highest. It was said that his martial path phantoms had increased from 5 to 10, which he called top 10 martial paths. Back when the two fought, he only had 4 phantoms. Closely behind him were lifeless blade artist Lung Feifen and Dugu Ju. Both of them were blade artists and could be said to be the brightest of the time. Both of them had set their sights on surpassing the other. For the moment, Lung Feifen still held the upper hand. After all, in terms of foundation, Lung Feifen was much more profound, while Dugu Ju had started too late. His current accomplishments were already astonishing. Xu Jing and Murong Qingcheng were also not bad, as well as Dantai Mingyu, Jiang Tian, Liu Wujian, and Snowsword of Gojosian. Moreover, 20 years ago, Stone Emperor had also successfully broken through to the 8th layer of life and death realm. It was said that he had spent a sky-high price in an auction to buy an Emperor Dao spirit root with only a remnant of its medicinal power remaining, allowing him to barely break through. However, his foundation was damaged after all. Becoming an 8th layer sky sovereign meant that his cultivation base was much weaker than an ordinary 8th layer sky sovereign. It would take a long time for him to recover. If not for Supreme Holy Land, Stone Emperor most likely wouldn't have chosen to break through hastily. The opening of Supreme Holy Land was fast approaching. All the rich and powerful families in the 3 great lifestar fields were sparing no effort to nurture their juniors. Supreme Holy Land only opened once every 10,000 years. If they missed this opportunity, they would have to wait for another 10,000 years. Now was the perfect time to use the 10,000 years of accumulation of the families. At this moment, it was all about foundation. The Dragon Clan had also recalled Xu Jing, intending to nurture her with all their might. They wanted her to break through to the 8th layer of life and death realm before Supreme Holy Land opened. Although it would be detrimental to the future, it was not worth mentioning compared to Supreme Holy Land. If they missed Supreme Holy Land, no matter how deep their foundation was, they would still be lacking in luck. Not everyone could be like Yi Chen, whose foundation was deeper than anyone else's and who could break through in such a short time. The majority of 7th layer life and death geniuses with potential only had 2 choices. One was to stabilize their foundation and wait until they had 80 to 90% certainty before breaking through. The other was to hasten their growth and disregard the future. As long as they had 50% certainty, they would go all out. Of course, hasten their growth also depended on whether the seedling had a solid foundation or not. Without that, no matter how many treasures one had, it would be useless. Cultivation base still had to be done step by step. It was impossible to break through one layer after another without suffering. Even if it was possible, it would only create a mediocre powerhouse. Such mediocre powerhouses could be found in the 3 great lifestar fields, if not 10,000. The Dragon Clan was nurturing Xu Jing, and Yi Chen was also preparing to nurture Murong Qingcheng at all costs. Yi Chen had spent more than 30 billion yuan stones to break through this time, leaving him with about 8 billion yuan stones. Adding the ones he had yet to obtain from the auction house, he had several tens of billions of yuan stones. Yi Chen decided to use them all to buy some treasures that could strengthen his foundation and increase his cultivation base. Murong Qingcheng had already broken through to the 7th layer for 30 years. She could be considered to have a bit of a foundation. Otherwise, even Yi Chen would have no way to help her. Days passed one after another. In the blink of an eye, there was only 1 year left before the opening of the Supreme Holy Land. Under Yi Chen's all-out nurturing, Murong Qingcheng had finally reached the peak of the 7th layer and could now attempt to break through. For this, Yi Chen had prepared 3 Emperor Dao Divine Pellets, which could increase her chances of breaking through by 10% in a short time. Murong Qingcheng had 3 chances. After 3 tries, it would be very difficult to break through. She could only take 3 Emperor Dao Divine Pellets in her lifetime. Chapter 1250. Rumble. The tribulation clouds covering countless planets converged once again. However, this time, their target was no longer Yi Chen, but Murong Qingcheng. In the last 3 months before the opening of the Supreme Holy Land, Murong Qingcheng had finally triggered the universal tribulation, advancing toward the 8th layer of life and death realm. However, she had failed twice before, and this was the 3rd time. Yi Chen discovered a use of the Hell Will, and that was to neutralize a part of the universe's will, reducing the might of the heavenly tribulation. After all, Murong Qingcheng did not walk the normal path, but the demonic path. The demonic path was fast, but the foundation was unstable, and it was easy for one to go berserk. If the power of the heavenly tribulation was too great, it would injure one's soul and martial Yuan spirit. This heavenly tribulation lasted for a long time before finally dissipating. At the same time, a powerful pressure spread out. It was the pressure of an emperor. Finally succeeded. Using Hell's will to contend against the universe's will was a strenuous and unrewarding task. Although the universe's calamity didn't have a pure consciousness and only had instincts, it would still carry out symbolic punishment to the one who interfered. A single mistake could easily lead to the end of both. Therefore, Yi Chen had only dared to do this after experimenting twice. In other words, in this world, perhaps only Yi Chen possessed the Hell Will. It was inevitable, but also accidental. Both were indispensable. After breaking through to the 8th layer, Murong Qingcheng's demonic power was very unstable, and the starry sky was flickering. This was the side effect of forcefully breaking through. Without any treasures to suppress and harmonize the demonic power, it would take hundreds or even thousands of years for the demonic power to become as smooth as an arm. The current Murong Qingcheng's strength was equivalent to a low-level emperor, and this was still because she could fight above her realm before. Otherwise, she wouldn't even be comparable to a low-level emperor. Take the yin-yang life-death pill first. Yi Chen was already prepared, so he handed over a black and white pill. The yin-yang life and death pill came from one of the top 10 alchemists of the Phoenix clan, the Sunflower Water Pill Emperor. It was all thanks to the Fire Sparrow Emperor that he was able to obtain the yin-yang life and death pill. After all, the Sunflower Water Pill Emperor was even more famous than the Silver Soul Pill Emperor who refined the Purple Soul Refining Pill. He was ranked among the top 3 alchemists of the Phoenix clan. The yin-yang life and death pill was a high-level emperor-grade pill, and it had many uses. One of them was to harmonize yin and yang, stabilizing the 5 elements in the body. If the demonic power or Jin Yuan was unstable, it was because the yin and yang in the body were not in harmony, and the 5 elements were in chaos. Of course, the yin-yang life and death pill could only adjust the condition, and it could not help the body reach its peak state all of a sudden. In order to reach the peak state, the body had to rely on itself, and the pill was only an aid. Murong Qingcheng nodded and swallowed the yin-yang life-death pill. The center of the White Tiger Star sector was a land of nothingness. It was filled with a thick black color and not a single star could be seen, as if it was a chaotic universe that had yet to be formed. 100 years have passed, the Supreme Holy Land will open. At first, this voice could only travel several hundred light years. However, as space and time trembled, the voice traveled further and further. Soon, all 3 major star areas could hear it. The Supreme Holy Land has opened. Unfortunately, we are only at the 7th layer of life and death realm. The 8th layer is too difficult. That's right. Unless we don't care about the price and spend a huge amount of treasures, we can't reach it in a short period of time. Those rich families' disciples are really lucky. Although the price of forcibly breaking through is huge, it's nothing compared to entering the Supreme Holy Land. If they're lucky, they might even obtain a Supreme's inheritance and eliminate the hidden danger in their foundation. Forget it. Even if we break through to the 8th layer, we won't be able to do anything after entering. The Supreme Holy Land is cut off from the outside world. If we don't have enough strength, we might even be killed. Some of the older generation's 8th layer sky sovereigns are approaching the end of their lifespans, so they value the Supreme's inheritance even more. Riches come from danger. You can't say it like that. All of a sudden, the 3 major star areas were talking about the Supreme Holy Land. In the void, a golden battleship was flying at an extreme speed. Inside the battleship sat Yi Chen and Murong Qingcheng. Xu Jing's destination was the Azure Dragon Star area, so she wasn't with the two. I heard that Du Guju has become the disciple of Yin and Yang Blade Emperor, and Dantai Mingyu has joined the High Heaven Pavilion. They should both be at the 8th layer of Life and Death Realm. Murong Qingcheng's demonic power had stabilized a lot. After becoming an emperor, her body now had a noble and graceful aura. Yi Chen faintly nodded. Yin and Yang Blade Emperor is one of the top Blade Emperors of the human race. He has the strength of a quasi-monarch. The High Heaven Pavilion is an emperor-level power. Raising the two to the 8th layer of Life and Death Realm is not hard. Du Guju and Dantai Mingyu, who came from Elysium, didn't have any background. Wanting to break through to the 8th layer of Life and Death Realm in a short period of time was too difficult. Although Yi Chen wanted to, he didn't have the resources to provide them. Raising Murong Qingcheng was already his limit. Of course, the two might not necessarily accept it. Becoming the disciple of a powerful expert or joining a powerful force was undoubtedly a wise decision for them. Zhu, you are Master's 8th disciple, and also the disciple that Master favors the most. I hope that during this trip to the Supreme Holy Land, you will be able to obtain the inheritance of a Blade Sovereign. Heaven Flower Planet, Yin and Yang Peak. Yin and Yang Blade Emperor stood with his hands clasped behind his back and said to Du Guju, "Master, rest assured. Du Guju won't let you down." Du Guju cupped his hands and bowed. "All right. You can go now." Yin and Yang Blade Emperor waved his hand. "Farewell, Master." Turning around, Du Guju flew into the sky and left. Zhu is more suitable for the Blade Dao than my 7 disciples. Whether he can succeed or not will depend on his luck. Encountering Du Guju was an extremely coincidental thing. Yin and Yang Blade Emperor took a liking to the latter and personally went to his residence, asking to take him in as a disciple and promising to raise him to the 8th layer of Life and Death Realm. After interacting for a while, Yin and Yang Blade Emperor once again realized that the latter was a rare Blade Dao genius. Perhaps he might not be able to inherit his legacy, but he would certainly be able to walk further on the path of the Blade Dao. As for why he didn't go to the Supreme Holy Land, it was quite simple. He had already been there twice. The Supreme Holy Land not only required strength, but also opportunities. It was not a place where one could reap rewards just by going there, and it was also not a place where one could reap rewards just by having strength. Having been there twice, he knew that he had no fate with the Supreme Holy Land, and forcing it would only ruin his own Dao heart. At the same time, Dantai Mingyu also left the High Heaven Pavilion and headed toward the central void of the White Tiger Starfield. Having reached the 8th layer of Life and Death Realm, her aura was extremely stable, and it did not seem like she had experienced a forceful breakthrough. The Yin-Yang Sky Patching spell is a secret martial art of my High Heaven Pavilion. Although it is not a martial art, it is more powerful than a martial art. Once trained to a certain level, it will be able to reverse the cycle of yin and yang, making up for all the deficiencies. This was what the pavilion master had told her. Haha, Supreme Holy Land, I, Chu Zhongtian, have arrived. Back then, Chu Zhongtian was over 50 years old and could not enter the God Paradise. However, this did not hinder his growth. After traveling for nearly 100 years, he relied on his perseverance and luck to successfully break through to the 7th layer of Life and Death Realm. Then, he met a mysterious old man. He did not know what the old man's strength was, because he could not even touch the old man's bottom line. Under the guidance of the mysterious old man, he advanced by leaps and bounds, reaching the 8th layer of life and death realm. Yi Chen, Dugu Ju, you two should be going to the Supreme Holy Land, right? That's good too, being alone is too lonely. Chapter 1251. At the center of White Tiger Starfield, there was a starry gate comparable to a planet. On the left side of the gate was coiled an azure dragon, and on the right side was a white tiger roaring. Above it was a vermilion bird soaring, and below it was a black tortoise carrying the entire gate. It gave off a vast and majestic feeling of oppression and vicissitudes. At this moment, the starry gate had already opened. The inside was a sea of chaos, and no one knew where it led to. Seems like I, old ancestor Kang Kong, am the first to arrive. An aged figure instantly appeared in front of the gate. With a chuckle, his figure flickered and entered the gate. Supreme Holy Land was only open to 8th layer life and death realm experts. Without sufficient cultivation base, one couldn't even see the gate. Although Supremes could see it, they couldn't enter. The first was the rule, and the second was that one shouldn't look down on this gate. It was one of the 4 spiritual gates that had been born since ancient times. It was mysterious and unfathomable, and anyone who dared to offend it would be crushed. As time passed, more and more emperors entered Supreme Holy Land. Some were nearing the end of their lifespans, some were like the sun in the sky, and some were young emperors. All of them had the same goal, to obtain the inheritance of a supremacy and shorten the time needed to break through. It should be known that any supremacy's inheritance contained the secret of breaking through to the 9th layer. Without this secret, it would take a lot of time to figure it out by relying on oneself or other supremes. In the distance, a purple battleship appeared. The cabin door opened, and 3 youths walked out, 2 men and 1 woman. The leading youth was clad in purple. As he looked around, he gave off an indescribable domineering aura. Judging from his powerful aura, he was clearly a quasi-venerable. The man and woman following behind him were much weaker than him in terms of aura. They should be peak emperors or high-level emperors. Purple-robed emperor, is Supreme Holy Land really as mystical as the legends say? The Empress was very curious about Supreme Holy Land and asked. The purple-robed youth smiled and said, "It only opens once every 10,000 years. Just this point alone is enough to show how extraordinary it is. After entering, you all have to be careful. There are countless corpses of paragons inside. Their corpse chi has formed new life forms that are proficient in some of the martial arts of paragons. The stronger ones even have the strength of a quasi-paragon. However, they usually appear in the core region." The purple-robed emperor was one of the 4 young quasi-venerables of the human race. The 4 young quasi-venerables were purple-white, golden-green, and the green-robed emperor was also one of them. On the quasi-venerables list, the purple-robed emperor was ranked 19th, while the green-robed emperor was ranked 21st. Although there weren't many quasi-venerables among the major races, there were more than 10 times more than supreme beings. Being ranked 19th was almost invincible among those below the supreme being level. In comparison, old ancestor Wuling, yin-yang old man, and the others could only be considered as powerful quasi-venerables. The purple-robed emperor alone could easily suppress all of them and eliminate 1 or 2 of them. The purple-white, golden-green, and golden-white quasi-venerables were all far from 10,000 years old. In their respective generations, they were all number 1 in the paradise of gods. Over the countless years, no one knew how many number 1 rankers of the paradise of gods there had been. All they knew was that the weakest among them was a high-level emperor, and the strongest was an honorable. "Let's go in." The purple-robed emperor's figure flickered, turning into a purple cloud that floated toward the Gate of 4 Souls and disappeared within. Supreme Holy Land. This enormous holy land was actually a plane. There were strong planes and weak planes. The weak planes, even without a gate, couldn't stop the invasion of life and death kings. The strong planes, on the other hand, were close to a world with a world barrier. Even supreme beings couldn't invade them. Although Supreme Holy Land wasn't a world, it wasn't too far off. Moreover, The aura of the Supreme Being's corpses had corroded the entire plane over the years, giving it its own spirituality. If a Supreme Being wanted to invade it, it would be harder than invading a world. Supreme Holy Land was the foundation of the human race. Without it, the human race would undoubtedly be much weaker. This was also the reason why the powerful races would grow stronger and stronger, while the weak races would never be able to close the gap. This was the accumulation of countless years, and as time passed, the accumulation would only grow stronger and stronger. Of course, it had to be mentioned that the human race's supreme holy land wasn't the strongest. The land of demons and demons was even more famous. Evil spirit race had their land of evil spirits, barbarian tribe had their savage holy land, and giant tribe had their giant spirit graveyard. The boundless supreme being corpse chi formed a faint mist. In Supreme Holy Land, the martial aura was extremely dense. Even if a supreme being died, the aura and will they left behind contained the essence of martial skills. This essence could even change the rules of space and time. Creating martial skills here was 10 times, dozens of times, or even 100 times easier than outside. Many supreme martial skills were created in Supreme Holy Land, and the creator could perfect them in Supreme Holy Land. Each mountain represented a supreme being's corpse. Yi Chen and Murong Qingcheng were currently in the periphery. Trespassing into Supreme Holy Land, die. Within the mist, human figures rushed out one after another. These figures were either using fire profound martial skills, water profound martial skills, or earth profound martial skills. Each of these martial skills was extremely powerful. Even Yi Chen didn't think that the first change martial skill he had created could surpass them. These figures weren't people, but new lives formed from the Supreme Being's corpse energy. They were commonly called corpses. Although corpses were living beings, they lacked intelligence. They only had the instinct to display martial skills. In Supreme Holy Land, they were immortal and indestructible. Once they were killed, they would be born again in the next moment. Endless martial skills, this is truly worthy of being called a Supreme Holy Land. Yi Chen praised. Every time he killed a corpse, Yi Chen would gain insight into a martial skill. Although this martial skill didn't have much power, it contained a trace of the Supreme Being's martial skill essence. The more he saw, the more inspirations he would have. Gradually, the two of them ventured deeper into Supreme Holy Land. As they went deeper, the strength of these corpses became increasingly strong. From a first revolution martial skill, it became a second revolution martial skill. This is almost my limit. Murong Qingcheng looked at the nearest mountain. Yi Chen nodded, be careful. The corpses were just a small problem. The key was how to get close to the Supreme Being's corpse. The closer one got to the Supreme Being's corpse, the stronger the strength of the corpses and the more terrifying the might of their martial skills. Although there were a large number of corpses displaying second revolution martial skills, once they got close to the Supreme Being's corpse, it was normal to see corpses displaying fourth revolution martial skills. Fortunately, the power of the corpses wasn't endless. Yi Chen continued to venture deeper. As for the Supreme Being's inheritance, he didn't care much about it. It would be best if he had it, but it didn't matter if he didn't. What he cared about was the atmosphere of martial arts. Here, he felt that his inspiration was always flying. In the outside world, it would take a long time for him to have a trace of inspiration. Chapter 1252. Kid, the Earth Star Border Sovereign's inheritance belongs to me, Wanhua Emperor. Get out of my way. Wanhua Emperor was a peak emperor. As a peak emperor, if he wanted to go one step further and become a quasi-sovereign, he would need at least a few thousand years to reach this goal. However, if he could obtain the supreme inheritance, he could do it in a short period of time. Moreover, there was the possibility of breaking through to the supreme realm in the future. Is that so? Although I don't know if the inheritance is suitable for me, there's no reason for me to let you have it. Chu Zhongtian grinned as he struck towards the Wanhua Emperor. Courting death. Wanhua Emperor was furious. His body burst out with countless rays of light as he punched out. Rumble. The earth shook, and Wanhua Emperor vomited blood as he was sent flying. Quasi-sovereign. Wanhua Emperor was shocked. Not bad. Although he said so, Chu Zhongtian thought inwardly, Master said I have the strength of a quasi-sovereign. I didn't believe it at first, but now it seems to be true. You win. Wanhua Emperor turned and left. White-haired kid, the inheritance of Iron Bloodblade Sovereign is not something you can touch. Don't force me to take action. Leave quickly. The same situation happened to Du Guju. However, Du Guju's opponent was even more powerful than Wanhua Emperor. He was clearly a quasi-sovereign, titled Star-Splitting Blade Emperor. If you want to fight, then fight. What's with all the nonsense? Compared to the supreme inheritance, Du Guju seemed more interested in his opponent. He pulled out his blade and attacked. Bastard, you asked for it. Seeing his opponent so arrogant, Star-Splitting Blade Emperor's eyes turned cold. He pulled out his shining blade and slashed out with Star-Splitting Slash. Clang clang clang. After exchanging over 100 moves, neither of them could do anything to the other. The Star-Splitting Blade Emperor was only a normal one among the demigods, but Du Guju was not that bad either. He also had the strength of a normal demigod. The Yin and Yang Blade Emperor had spent half of his lifetime's wealth, and it was not as simple as raising Du Guju to the 8th sky of life and death realm. Yin-Yang Blade Emperor's Yin-Yang Blade Arts. Star-Splitting Saber Emperor vaguely recognized Du Guju's saber technique, but he was not sure. The reason why Xiao Chen could not be sure was that Du Guju's Yin-Yang saber technique was different from the Yin-Yang saber sovereigns. Although it was much more immature, it had other things. Of course, the essence was the same. They both borrowed force to fight. The Yin-Yang Saber Emperor was famous among the quasi-venerables. The Yin-Yang Saber technique was a famous martial art. The Star-Splitting Saber Emperor knew his own limitations. He knew that even if his strength increased by 10 times, he would still not be a match for the Yin-Yang Saber Emperor. The other party possessed the Yin-Yang Saber technique. The chances of him defeating the other party were slim. Do you still want to fight? Du Guju secretly exclaimed that the yin and yang sabersmanship was really powerful. He thought to himself, my cultivation has improved, but my sabersmanship has not. I only have 60% to 70% of the essence of the master's yin and yang sabersmanship. After adding some of my own things, it actually has such power. Not only can it resolve the opponent's attack, but it can also counterattack. Send my regards to the Yin-Yang Saber Emperor. The Star-Splitting Saber Monarch was straightforward and did not pester him for too long. In the younger generation, Arju was the most tyrannical. Once the 10 strongest martial arts were used, 10 Arjayas immediately appeared. Each Arju could use a 4th revolution martial art and beat his opponent, a quasi-venerable, into a sorry state. The 10 strongest martial arts complemented each other. It wasn't as simple as 1 + 1 = 2. The 10 martial arts would also fuse together to a certain extent. It was said that when the upper echelons of Arju's family knew that Arju had evolved the martial art phantom into the 10 strongest martial arts, they unanimously passed the decision to make Arju the family's saint son. In their opinion, if Arju became a sovereign one day, he would definitely become a legend among sovereigns. The 10 strongest martial arts seemed very difficult to cultivate. After all, one had to cultivate 10 different martial arts. However, once one reached the great accomplishment stage, each martial art would become a supreme martial art. Then, among the sovereigns, there would be almost no one who could be a match for them. This was a kind of martial arts where one would either succeed or die trying. The potential was huge, but the bottleneck was also huge. In this trip to Sovereign Holy Land, Arju was determined to win. He was different from Yi Chen. Yi Chen walked on the path of pure sword Dao, pursuing self-improvement. On the other hand, Arju's 10 strongest martial arts paid attention to the multitude of rivers running into the sea. If he could obtain the inheritance of a sovereign, then he would obtain countless martial arts experience, and reaching the great accomplishment stage of the 10 strongest martial arts would be a lot easier. After all, a sovereign would certainly create more than one supreme martial art in his lifetime. Some outstanding sovereigns could even create dozens of supreme martial arts. In addition to Arju, Du Guju, Chu Zhongtian, and others, Lung Feifan, Xu Jing, and Dantai Mingyu had all risen to prominence in sovereign Holy Land. In the past, they were only geniuses. But now, they already had the strength to contend against the powerhouses of the older generation. Murong Qingcheng was originally not much inferior to them. However, with Yi Chen's resources, pushing her to the 8th layer of life and death realm was already his utmost effort. The rest had the heart but lacked the strength. After all, Yi Chen was just one person. In terms of resources accumulation, he couldn't compare with the big powers or races. In addition to these people, there was also a young woman who was even more shocking. She was Xianhu, the Xianhu who had been missing for 100 years. Back in Elysium, the only people Yi Chen admired were Dragon King and Xianhu. Towards Dragon King, Yi Chen respected the most, and towards Xianhu, Yi Chen truly admired her. If Xianhu didn't spend so much energy on other things, even if her martial strength wasn't as good as Yi Chen's, it wouldn't be too far off. It could be said that in the entire Elysium, only Xianhu could compete with him. Apart from martial Dao, she was also proficient in formations, restrictions, seals, medicine, astrology, and even numerology. The first time she saw Yi Chen, she could tell that Yi Chen's past was shrouded in mist, and so was his future. It was just like the demon's shaman demon king's bloodline could see each other's futures. Even if Xianhu wasn't as good as the shaman demon king's bloodline, she at least had her own essence. After disappearing for 100 years, Xianhu had already broken through to the 8th layer of life and death realm. Her cultivation base was incomparably stable, not much inferior to Yi Chen's. Apart from this, her body was emitting a mysterious aura that seemed to slow down the spacetime it came in contact with, becoming reasonable and traceable. This was the embodiment of the mystical path reaching a higher level. If the king of mysticism, who had passed down the mystical path, were to be resurrected and meet the mysterious queen, he would most likely immediately become her disciple. This was because the mysterious queen's mystical path was many times higher than his. It had already reached a level that involved fate. 8 gates of life and death. Xianhu waved her hand, and 8 light gates enveloped the quasi-venerables in front of her. What martial skill is this? The quasi-venerables had never encountered such an opponent. These 8 light gates cut off his connection with the outside world, and even his perception of spacetime. He couldn't even tell where his opponent was. Buzz! A light gate behind him suddenly lit up, and a life character appeared on it. Many thanks. The quasi-venerables knew that the opponent didn't want to tangle with him, giving him a way out. His figure flickered, and he entered the life gate. Chapter 1253. Third Revolution Martial Art. 4th rank martial art. As he went deeper, the corpses that Yi Chen came into contact with became more and more powerful. Each corpse had a unique 4th revolution martial art, or in other words, they were formed from the corpse qi and martial art intent of the Ji Zun, and each of them represented a 4th revolution martial art. If it weren't for the fact that these corpses could only attack once, Yi Chen might not have been able to continue. The world's martial arts are as vast as the sea, endless and endless. Although my martial arts philosophy is different from those supreme experts, the techniques I use to create martial arts are all here, and they are even better and more perfect than mine. A supreme expert is worthy of being a supreme expert. 4th rank martial arts can be easily created. Given enough time, it would be easy for them to create 1,000 or even 10,000 4th rank martial arts. Yi Chen was inexplicably emotional. Although he had created the supreme sword technique Doomsday Calamity based on the power of the 5 elements of old ancestor Wu Ling, it was basically impossible for him to create a second supreme sword technique. After all, he had not even grasped a little bit of Doomsday Calamity. As for 4th rank martial arts, he could indeed create some, but it was very limited. He did not have that much martial arts experience in his mind. At most, he could create 10 4th rank martial arts before his martial arts thoughts would dry up. Supremes also had different levels of strength. From low to high, they were ordinary supremes, mid-supremes, powerful supremes, and super supremes. Generally speaking, supremes who had just advanced to the 9th layer of life and death realm would only be ordinary supremes. After all, Those who could become supremes were all geniuses with peerless innate talents. Of course, there were some exceptions. Some geniuses with powerful innate talents could even make geniuses of the past pale in comparison. These geniuses could defy common sense and become mid-supremes or even powerful supremes as soon as they advanced to the 9th layer. Supreme Holy Lands. The outer perimeter was filled with ordinary supremes. Just a little deeper, it was filled with mid-level supremes. Even deeper, it was filled with powerful supremes. The region that Yi Chen was in right now was already the graveyard of super supremes. The difference between super sovereigns and ordinary sovereigns wasn't limited to the amount of energy. More importantly, super sovereigns had a deeper understanding of the essence of power. It could be said that super sovereigns had already reached the ultimate realm of seeing mountains as mountains and water as water. They could display the same amount of power by 10 times. In fact, Supreme Supremes weren't the limit. Above Supreme Supremes were the even more powerful Legendary Supremes. Compared to Supreme Supremes, Legendary Supremes were the limits of human strength. Whether it was domains, supreme martial arts, willpower, or spiritual bodies, they were all at a level where they couldn't be improved anymore. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they were gods in the mortal world. Unfortunately, Legendary Supremes did not exist in every generation. Generally, only one or two would appear every few 100,000 years. Sometimes, one might not even appear in millions or tens of millions of years. A powerful corpse charged towards Yi Chen, unleashing a killer move that contained the 8 Desolation 6 Unity Universe. 8 Desolation Supremes 8 Desolation Hand. The person who spoke wasn't Yi Chen, but a young man in a golden robe. He held a golden rod in his hand and exuded a domineering aura. If other quasi-sovereigns were here, they would definitely recognize this person as one of the 4 young quasi-sovereigns, the golden-clad emperor. This was the first time Yi Chen had encountered a corpse that used a supreme martial art. He didn't dare to be careless and unleashed his doomsday calamity, slashing out with his sword. Peng! Blazing sparks exploded and a destructive aura spread out. If the 8 Desolation Hand contained a world, a universe, then Yi Chen's doomsday calamity was the ultimate power that could destroy a world. The 8 Desolation Hand was slashed apart, and the corpse was directly crushed into nothingness by the aftermath. What a powerful sword intent! Why have I never seen this person before? The golden-clad emperor had originally thought that Yi Chen wouldn't be able to deal with this corpse, but he hadn't expected that it wouldn't even be able to withstand a single attack from Yi Chen. Although a corpse could only unleash one attack, it would dissipate after that. Just as the golden-clad emperor was slightly distracted, another corpse suddenly appeared from the white mist. This corpse wasn't any weaker than the previous one, and its right hand formed a claw that tore through the air. Yi Chen could easily tell that this claw technique was extremely powerful, and that no matter how he tried to dodge, he wouldn't be able to avoid it. The sky, the ground, and the earth were all within his attack range. Rui Universe Claw. The golden-clad emperor was startled. The 8 Desolation Supreme was a supreme sovereign from 500,000 years ago, and there were records of his ultimate moves. Although the Rui Universe Claw wasn't as powerful as the 8 Desolation Hand, it was much sharper and more cunning. Those who were slightly weaker would be instantly pierced through. Sky-covering staff. The supreme claw technique of a supreme sovereign, and Yi Chen's strength, also roused the golden-clad emperor's heroic spirit and domineeringness. He swung out his own supreme staff technique, the sky-covering staff. In an instant, countless staff shadows filled the entire space, sealing off all angles of attack from the Rui Universe Claw. Crackle, crackle. A series of explosions rang out, and the Rui Universe Claw was instantly broken. Countless staff shadows surged forward, beating the corpse to death. So it's just a superficial part of the Rui Universe Claw. The golden-clad emperor heaved a sigh of relief. He had seen the records of the Rui Universe Claw, and even he wouldn't be able to block it if it was only able to unleash 1/10,000th of its power. Unless his sky-covering staff could truly cover the sky and leave no gaps, the Rui Universe Claw would have a chance to unleash its power. Excellent staff technique. Yi Chen praised. Same to you. The golden-clad emperor laughed heartily. I am Wei Tian. May I know your name? Yi Chen. Yi Chen replied. Yi Chen, you're the #1 disciple of God Paradise. You've really surprised me. I didn't expect that not only would you enter the 8th layer, but your strength would also increase by leaps and bounds. Wei Tian had heard of Yi Chen before. After all, he was once the #1 disciple of God Paradise. He originally thought that even if Yi Chen's talent was extremely high, he would still need time to grow. Becoming a quasi-sovereign would already be amazing. You're flattering me. The golden-clad emperor's strength made Yi Chen not dare to look down on him. This sky-covering staff was different from his own doomsday calamity. It contained the yin and yang profound. In terms of foundation, Yi Chen was inferior to the golden-clad emperor. After all, the golden-clad emperor had been famous for a long time, and a greenhorn like Yi Chen couldn't compare to him. 8 Desolation Supreme has 6 supreme martial skills, and we've only seen 2 of them. Why don't we go together? The golden-clad emperor didn't care whether or not he could obtain 8 Desolation Supreme's inheritance. But, if he could experience all 6 supreme martial skills of 8 Desolation Supreme, it would be extremely beneficial for him. His sky-covering staff was currently at a bottleneck. Once it broke through, its strength would increase by 10-fold or 100-fold. All right. Yi Chen also wanted to experience the other supreme martial skills of 8 Desolation Supreme. His knowledge was limited, so the golden-clad emperor might be able to explain it to him. Just like that, the two witnessed the other 4 supreme martial skills of 8 Desolation Supreme. They were 6 Combined Fist, Desolate Sky Tyrant Kick, Universe Chi Finger, and the most powerful 8 Desolation 6 Combined Palm. Worthy of being 8 Desolation Supreme, 8 Desolation 6 Combined Fist is even more tyrannical than I imagined. One palm strike is earth-shattering. The golden-clad emperor was still immersed in the atmosphere of the martial skills just now. Turning around, the golden-clad emperor looked at Yi Chen. Hey! At that moment, Yi Chen's face was filled with a sense of sacredness. His sword did not move, but the golden-robed emperor could clearly see an illusory image of Yi Chen waving his sword. His sword technique was filled with the power of the 5 elements, and it was no longer as rigid as before. It was as if the 5 elements of heaven and earth were all under the control of his sword. No wonder he grew so fast. Such comprehension is even more terrifying than the green-robe emperor. The green-robed emperor was the youngest of the purple-white, golden-azure quasi-sovereigns. Seriously speaking, most of the essence of doomsday calamity came from Wuling ancestor, and only a small part belonged to Yi Chen. This was different from the supreme martial arts created by the golden-robed emperor and the others. Its foundation was weaker. Now that Yi Chen had seen the 6 supreme martial arts of the 8 Desolate Supremacy, he was suddenly inspired. He began to fuse the essence of Wuling ancestors' martial arts with the martial arts experience he had absorbed from the Supreme Holy Land, turning it into the essence of his own sword technique. Once the sword was unleashed, the chi of the 5 elements flowed. They generated and countered each other, and the embryonic form of the world seemed to be evolving in this sword. Supreme martial art, 5 elements sword technique. After a long while, Yi Chen came back to his senses. Many thanks. Yi Chen knew that the golden-robed emperor was protecting him. Otherwise, the corpses would have rushed over and posed a threat to him. What is the name of this sword technique? The golden-robed emperor could feel the profundity of the 5 elements sword technique. The doomsday calamity from before was indeed powerful, but it seemed that it could not be used as freely as it pleased. 5 elements sword technique. Yi Chen's face was full of confidence. This was the first supreme sword technique he had created. Chapter 1254. The Supreme of Octoterra's inheritance doesn't suit us. Let's go. Golden-robed emperor had no intention of accepting the inheritance, even though they didn't necessarily meet the requirements. Yes. The Supreme of Octoterra's inheritance indeed didn't suit them. Yi Chen was already very satisfied to be able to see part of the essence of the Supreme of Octoterra's martial arts. It was more useful than hundreds of years of hard work. The closer they got to the core area of the Supreme Holy Land, the more terrifying the aura became. Even though these supreme beings had died countless years ago, the aura and will they left behind were still unimaginable. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to form extraordinary beings like corpses. From ancient times until now, very few people knew how many Supremes had been buried in supreme sacred grounds. At the very least, Yi Chen and Golden-Robed Emperor didn't know. What they had seen was merely the tip of the iceberg. Even so, in half a month, the two had witnessed the supreme martial skills of dozens of Supremes. Each of these supreme martial skills could shake the heaven and earth. If they were used by a Supremes themselves, they would be able to twist the heaven and earth and tear apart time and space. Supreme Sacred Elephant is indeed one of the strongest supreme beings in the history of the War Elephant clan. When he uses this move, it can really shake the world and collapse the galaxy. Golden-Robed Emperor was still frightened. There was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. Just now, a powerful corpse had attacked him and Yi Chen. The two of them had joined forces, but they had almost been heavily injured. One could imagine how powerful this move was. The ultimacies of earth, water, fire, and wind combined with the ultimacy of power is indeed extraordinary. Yi Chen was also quite impressed. Demonic beasts didn't create very powerful martial arts in their early stages. But once they became supreme beings, their flaws would gradually be fixed. It wasn't difficult for them to create one or two supreme martial arts. At least, they wouldn't be too far off from human supreme beings. There weren't too many techniques involved in this move. It was pure power and violence. Of course, it wasn't brute force either. After all, it contained the perfect ultimacy of earth, water, fire, and wind. But compared to this move, I'm more afraid of Supreme Shen Yuan's killing move of Shen Yuan, Yi Chen said. Supremacy Shen Yuan's Shen Yuan killer style. Of course it's powerful. I was almost sucked into it. Upon hearing Yi Chen's words, the Golden-Robed Emperor hurriedly nodded his head. A few days ago, the two of them had seen Shen Yuan Supremacy's Shen Yuan killing style. To them, this killing move was no ordinary martial art. It was simply a super black hole. What was more frightening was that once the black hole reached its limit, it would shatter into countless smaller black holes. If one's strength was slightly weaker, they would immediately be torn apart. Unknowingly, the two of them arrived in front of a huge mountain. The height of this mountain was unknown. It was like an ancient mountain, giving off an extremely strong pressure. To their surprise, there were already people in front of the giant peak. There were 3 men and 2 women. Purple-robed Emperor. The Golden-Robed Emperor recognized the purple-robed youth at a glance. Gold-robed Emperor? What a coincidence. The purple-robed Emperor turned his head and looked over. This is... The purple-robed Emperor was very curious about how Yi Chen could walk with the Golden-Robed Emperor. The Golden-Robed Emperor introduced, "This is Yi Chen. I believe you've heard of him before. However, both of us have underestimated him. His strength is already no weaker than mine." Oh, since the Golden-Robed Emperor said so, it should be true. The purple-robed Emperor's calm expression revealed a trace of surprise. He knew the Golden-Robed Emperor's strength, but Yi Chen could actually stand shoulder to shoulder with him. How terrifying. Yi Chen, this is the purple-robed Emperor. His fan dance is extremely mysterious. The Golden-Robed Emperor introduced the purple-robed Emperor to Yi Chen. Yi Chen had heard of the purple-robed Emperor before. Of course, he had heard about them from the Fire Sparrow Emperor. After all, the Fire Sparrow Emperor was in love with the green-robed Emperor. After chatting with the purple-robed Emperor for a while, Yi Chen walked over to a woman in white. This woman was none other than Shenhu Yang Qingxian, whom he had not seen for 100 years. "Senior Yang, how have you been?" Yi Chen looked Yang Qingxian up and down. Compared to before, Yang Qingxian seemed even more elegant and refined. She was like a fairy from the 9 heavens, and her eyes seemed to be able to see through fate. They had an indescribable charm and charm. Yi Chen. Yang Qingxian smiled when she saw Yi Chen. Among the younger generation of Elysium, the only one she valued was Yi Chen. After a long time, she had gradually come to see him as a peer. She smiled and said, "Don't call me senior. I'm only a few decades older than you. You're making me sound old. Just call me by my name." She knew that Yi Chen respected her, but she was actually not Yi Chen's teacher. In fact, she and Yi Chen were both juniors of the Dragon King, so it was only right for her to call the Dragon King senior. Moreover, Elysium and the outside world were two different worlds. There was no need to talk about the past. All right then, Qingxian. Yi Chen also felt that it was inappropriate to call her senior. Life and Death Kings had a lifespan of 100,000 years. In Elysium, it was fine to call her senior. Here, age had no meaning. For example, the Gold Robe Emperor was 1,000 years older than Yi Chen. Compared to 100,000 years, the gap between him and Yang Qingxian was almost negligible. Besides the Purple Robe Emperor and Yang Qingxian, there were 2 men and 1 woman. They were an old man, a middle-aged man, and an old woman. The old man was called Old Ancestor Kang Kong, one of the oldest demi-masters of the human race. The middle-aged man was the Godly Spear Emperor, and the old woman wore a phoenix hairpin and held a dragon-headed walking stick in her hand. She looked quite dignified, and people called her Granny Dragon and Phoenix. It was said that her body contained the blood of dragon and phoenix, and she was a half-beast. "Youngsters, you are still young. Old Man Heaven's will's inheritance should be left to me, Old Ancestor Kang Kong. You will have plenty of chances." Old Ancestor Kang Kong didn't dare to look down on them, especially the Purple Robe Emperor and the Gold Robe Emperor. These two undoubtedly had the strength to fight against any demi-masters. The Gold Robe Emperor smiled, "Old Ancestor Kang Kong, don't take advantage of your seniority. Moreover, the inheritance of a sovereign is for those who are fated to obtain it. Even if we give it to you, you might not be able to get it." "That's true, but if you don't fight for it, wouldn't my chances be higher?" Old Ancestor Kang Kong still didn't give up. He didn't have the slightest bit of confidence that he could get the inheritance from so many people. Granny Dragon and Phoenix frowned. "Old Ancestor Kang Kong, you are underestimating Old Man Heaven's will. He is one of the few people who can fight against legendary sovereigns. He isn't as simple as you think. It won't be too late to talk about the inheritance after we defeat this corpse." As Granny Dragon and Phoenix spoke, her eyes were fixed on a corpse that walked out of the giant peak. This corpse's eyes were grayish-white, and they seemed to have intelligence. It wasn't as simple as an ordinary corpse. "7 of you. Your strength is not bad. If you can take 1 move from me, you can enter the mountain," she said with a gentle voice. "Old Man Heaven's will, you are still alive." Granny Dragon and Phoenix turned pale with fright. She shook his head and smiled. "People who die are dead. How can they come back to life? This is just a trace of intelligence born from the original body. It only has a part of the memories." Chapter 1255. This corpse was not Old Man Tianyi. It only had a small portion of Old Man Tianyi's memories, but this was already very terrifying. Other corpses could only instinctively use Old Man Tianyi's martial arts, but this corpse was equivalent to an incarnation of Old Man Tianyi to a certain extent. It could use martial arts more freely and exquisitely. 1 move. You're underestimating us too much. Old Ancestor Kang Kong laughed. He did not believe that Yi Chen could defeat them in 1 move. "Yi Chen, don't be careless. Old Man Tianyi's ultimate art is the Heaven's Will Capturing Hand. It contains a mysterious Tao, and to a certain extent, it represents the will of the universe. Be careful." Yang Qingxian transmitted her voice to Yi Chen. Yi Chen nodded. The Heaven's Will Capturing Hand, as the name suggested, was a capture from the heavens. The heavens were the universe, and humans could not defy it. However, Old Man Tianyi's martial arts seemed to be the same as Yang Qingxuan's. They both walked the mysterious Tao. Perhaps Yang Qingxian would be the most suitable to receive Old Man Tianyi's inheritance. After making up his mind, Yi Chen decided to help Yang Qingxian obtain Old Man Tianyi's inheritance. She walked over step by step. Every step was incomparably natural, as if he had always been there and had never moved. Seeing this, The seven became even more cautious. Old Man Tiani was different from the other supremes. His every move was in accordance with the will of the heavens. Going against him was equivalent to going against the heavens. One could imagine the difficulty. This move of mine has a total of 4,999,900 variations. Whoever can endure it will be qualified to ascend the mountain. Take this. She stretched out his right hand and grabbed towards the seven. Without a sound, the entire sky turned dark as countless hand shadows descended towards the seven. Good timing. Purple Robe Emperor shouted. A purple fan appeared in his hand. With a wave of the fan, time and space twisted. The fan shadows danced and wrapped around the descending hand shadows. The fan danced, forming a world of its own. Any attack would be absorbed by this world. This was also the supreme martial art that Purple Robe Emperor was famous for. Divine Spear Emperor walked the tyrannical path, not retreating nor dodging. The black iron long spear in his hand spun like a wheel of wind and fire, blocking one hand shadow after another. Granny Long Fong threw out the dragon-head walking stick in her hand. With a dragon roar, the dragon-head walking stick transformed into a golden dragon that protected Granny Long Fong. She didn't stay idle either. She pulled out the phoenix hairpin from her bun, and from time to time, she would release a flaming phoenix claw to meet the hand shadow. Kang Kong Ancestor lived up to his reputation as one of the veteran quasi-venerables. His Kang Kong Guardian light was as vast as the sky. Any hand shadows that came into contact with it would immediately disappear without a trace. It was obvious that this was also a martial art that contained the world. However, compared to the purple-robed emperor's universal fan dance, this move was not as agile, but it was more than enough for defense. Compared to the previous four, Yang Qingxian wasn't that famous. However, sometimes, fame and power weren't related. Yang Qingxian waved her hand and a huge mirror appeared. The hand images in the sky were reflected by the mirror and immediately replicated into countless new hand images. These hand images flew out from the mirror and met the hand images in the sky. What a wondrous martial art! Golden-robed Emperor sized up Yang Qingxian and praised her in his heart. At the same time, he also used his sky-covering rod to block the attack of the hand images. The five-element sword art was so profound that even Yi Chen couldn't comprehend it. At most, he could only comprehend 1,000th or even 10,000th of it. The greatest characteristic of the five-element sword art was that, just like the five-element sword art, the sword chi was endless. Unless the internal balance of the five-element sword art was broken, there was no way to counter this move. Yi Chen, who used the five-element sword art, was the most relaxed among the seven. It wasn't because he was the strongest, but because the five-element sword art was too exquisite. This kid is amazing. He can actually create such a meticulous sword art based on the five elements profound. Kang Kong Ancestor frowned. The youngsters nowadays were more and more outstanding than the previous one. The older generation like them were a little on the decline. The five elements sword art has improved a lot. As a witness of the five elements sword art, Golden-robed Emperor didn't know what to say about Yi Chen. In such a short period of time, his sword art had improved steadily, and he had never stopped improving. At their level, profoundness was no longer important. They could basically learn the profoundness they were good at to perfection. But at this time, creativity was the most important. The more creativity one had, the more powerful the martial art would be. The same profoundness could be created differently by different people. Some were very ordinary, while others were unbelievably powerful. Even though Golden-robed Emperor wasn't afraid of the five-element sword art right now, he was sure that Yi Chen would be able to push the five-element sword art to a higher level if he was given more time. The hand images were endless, and the scariest thing was that as time passed, the hand images changed more and more. From the beginning, there were tens of thousands of changes, but now, there were hundreds of thousands of changes. One should know that the more changes there were, the harder it was to decipher it. Hundreds of thousands of changes meant hundreds of thousands of possibilities. If one didn't consider one possibility, it would be fatal. Heaven's will is unfathomable, and so is this move. It was the first time Yi Chen had seen such a complicated movement. It was even more complicated than the stars in the sky. The good thing was that the five-element sword art did not stop circulating, and there were very few flaws. Otherwise, it would have been broken through for sure. Ah! Suddenly, a muffled groan was heard. It was the divine spear emperor. He had missed several changes, and was caught by a huge hand image. He had no idea where he was thrown to. 7 people, only 6 were left. I don't believe that I, Ancestor Kang Kong, can't hold on until the end. Ancestor Kang Kong was gradually reaching his limit. A few drops of sweat appeared on his forehead, and his eyes flashed with unwillingness to admit defeat. Ancestor Kang Kong let out a roar and stretched his hands to the sides. Like a rock spreading its wings, a huge circle of light appeared. Looking closely, the circle of light was formed by countless black and white runes. This was his supreme defensive martial art, Vault of Heaven Protection. Dragon and Phoenix bring prosperity. Granny Dragon and Phoenix were not much better than Ancestor Kang Kong. A dragon and a phoenix surrounded her, and the two complemented each other seamlessly, bouncing away all the attacking hand images. Unfortunately, the Heaven's Will capturing hand was much stronger than they had imagined. Soon, when the Heaven's Will capturing hand had developed to more than 2 million changes, the Vault of Heaven Protection was broken, and the balance of the dragon and phoenix was broken. Ancestor Kang Kong and Granny Dragon and Phoenix were like monkeys in the hands of the Buddha. They were easily caught and thrown far away. In the end, only Purple Robe Emperor, Gold Robe Emperor, Yi Chen, and Yang Qingxian were left. 3 million changes. 4 million changes. 4.5 million changes. Fan dance, heaven and earth great shift. Purple Robe Emperor was unbelievably strong. He waved his fan and created countless space-time flows, moving the hand images away one by one. This is exciting. Watch my heaven-encompassing staff. Gold Robe Emperor didn't lose out. After a loud laugh, he waved the golden staff in his hand from bottom to top. In an instant, countless staff images merged into one, forming a huge staff that connected heaven and earth. The huge staff swept in the air, and heaven and earth seemed to be cleansed. It was as if this staff had wiped the heaven and earth clean. Compared to the two before them, Yi Chen and Yang Qingxian were slightly inferior. Yang Qingxian used the 8 gates of life and death to continuously dodge, while Yi Chen's 5 elements sword art gradually couldn't hold on. Compared to Purple Robe Emperor and Gold Robe Emperor, he was still a bit weaker. His 5 elements sword art was also a bit weaker, and it wasn't as profound as Fan Dance and Heaven Encompassing Staff. However, the Heaven's Will capturing hand with endless changes gave Yi Chen a lot of inspiration. The 5 elements sword art seemed to be on the verge of collapse, but it always dissolved the attacks at the crucial moment. 4,800,000 changes. 4,900,000 changes. 4,990,000 changes. Not bad, you can actually hold on until now. Sha had his own sentience. In truth, the true Heaven's Will capturing hand had already lost its transformations. The greatest transformation was the absence of transformations. However, it was impossible for him to reach the level of Old Man Heaven's Will. 4,999,900 transformations was his limit. Towards the end, every additional transformation was a whole new realm. It seems like Old Man Heaven's inheritance is not fated with me. Yang Qingxuan's 8 gates of life and death were destroyed one after another. The speed at which they were being created couldn't keep up with the speed at which they were being destroyed. 5 elements sword art rise and fall in time. A waterfall-like sword light sprinkled out, covering Yang Qingxian in an instant. The hand images that came into contact with the sword light were greatly weakened, and their changes were also reduced. Yang Qingxian easily dodged them. Yi Chen. Yang Qingxian looked at Yi Chen. Chapter 1256. The 5 elements were the most basic elements of all things in the universe. The rise and fall of the 5 elements would cause all things in the universe to change. Not only could it affect one's fate, but it also caused all things in the universe to cycle endlessly. The original 5 elements sword art only used the 5 elemental mysteries. The 5 elements were very balanced, but it also meant that it was inflexible. As the saying goes, the Tao follows nature. The 5 elements had their ups and downs. As the ups and downs changed, the 5 elements sword art came to life. For example, the metal profound declined, while the other 4 profundities flourished. Wood profound declined, while the other 4 profundities flourished. 2 declined and 3 flourished, 3 flourished and 2 waned. Not only that, the ups and downs also had their own ups and downs. Different degrees of ups and downs would cause different changes. In short, the combination of the 5 elements had endless changes and different effects. The appearance of the 5 elements sword art's ups and downs allowed Yi Chen to step into a new realm. He seemed to be able to hear the breathing of all things in the universe and see the invisible lines of law. His 5 elements sword art could faintly resonate with all things in the universe and guide the lines of law. Shi's Heaven's Will capturing hand hadn't reached the level of Old Man Heaven's Will, so it was broken by the 5 elements sword art. At this time, the 5 elements sword art might not be as powerful as the golden-robed emperor's sky-covering rod, nor as skilled as the purple-robed emperor's universal fan dance, but in terms of subtlety, it was superior. 4,999,000 variations. 4,999,900 variations. However, Shi's Heaven's Will capturing hand hadn't reached its limit. Although it had only increased by 9,900 transformations, its realm had increased by several levels. Its exquisite technique was still above the 5 elements sword art. At this moment, not to mention Yi Chen, even Purple Robe Emperor and Gold Robe Emperor could not hold on any longer. After breaking through countless hand shadows, one of them still managed to sneak in and teleport them to another place in the blink of an eye. 5 elements become 1, sword chi armor. At this time, the sword energy in Yi Chen's body was pushed to the limit. The 5 elements sword art materialized into a sword armor that landed on Yang Qingshuan's body. Once the hand shadows touched the sword armor, their power and transformations weakened. Although it wasn't as obvious as before, it still had an effect that couldn't be ignored. And after Yi Chen did all this, he was immediately grabbed by a hand shadow. Old Man Tiany's inheritance is not suitable for me. Qingxian, grasp it well. Yi Chen's voice could be heard, but he had already disappeared. Thank you, Yi Chen. Yang Qingxian was very clear that if it wasn't for her help, Yi Chen would have had a high chance of passing the test. Against the Heaven's Will capturing hand, no matter how powerful one's martial arts was, it would be useless. Only the level of subtlety would be enough. The 5 elements sword art was undoubtedly profound and unfathomable. Since Yi Chen could turn his sword art into a sword armor to protect her, it was clear that he had already grasped a part of the essence of the 5 elements sword art. Please ascend the mountain. Shi stopped attacking and opened up a path up the mountain. The Milky Way revolves. In front of another mountain in the supreme sacred ground, Chu Zhongtian was fighting with a corpse. This corpse's strength was far inferior to Old Man Tiany's corpse, but Chu Zhongtian was just one person. The Milky Way revolves was a supreme martial art. This supreme martial art wasn't comprehended by Chu Zhongtian himself, it was a martial art imprinted in his mind by the mysterious old man. If a sovereign were to know of this, they would definitely be able to guess that this mysterious old man was a sovereign, because only a sovereign could imprint his own supreme martial art into the mind of another. It was similar to inheritance, but different from inheritance. The longer the inheritance, the clearer the memory of the martial art would be. A supreme martial art forcefully imprinted in the mind would gradually fade with the passage of time, until that part of the memory was lost. Waving the mace, sparkling diamond stars appeared around Chu Zhongtian. These diamond stars seemed to revolve irregularly, but as they revolved, a majestic force was added to Chu Zhongtian's body. Some majestic force surged out from Chu Zhongtian's acupoints, forming a Milky Way that resonated with Chu Zhongtian's breathing. If Chu Zhongtian's thoughts changed, the Milky Way would also change. The opposite corpse couldn't be underestimated. The martial art it used was a supreme martial art that contained the profound mysteries of light and darkness, Heaven's secret transformation. The Heaven's secret transformation was mysterious and unfathomable. Flashes of light flickered, its trajectory impossible to predict. If it were another quasi-sovereign, they would have long since been melted by these flashes of light. Heaven's secret transformation, the supreme martial art of sovereign primordial universe. Fortunately, Master's Milky Way revolves around this kind of unpredictable supreme martial art. Chu Zhongtian began to suspect that his master, the mysterious old man, was a sovereign. Supreme martial arts were wondrous and extraordinary, there was no absolute restraint between them. It all depended on one's comprehension and usage. If the mysterious old man wasn't a sovereign, then the Milky Way revolves around him would be limited and wouldn't be able to easily deal with the heaven's secret transformation. Thus, Chu Zhongtian began to understand that the mysterious old man was at least a sovereign. A sovereign's supreme martial art and a quasi-sovereign's supreme martial art naturally couldn't be compared. The former had already been perfected, while the latter only had a trace of its essence. If one looked closely, they would realize that the Paragon sacred ground was like a huge chessboard. The center was filled with mist, and that was where the Paragon legend's tomb was. As for the people who came to the Paragon sacred ground, they were like chess pieces that were either actively or passively teleported to different areas. The place where Yi Chen appeared was extremely close to the legendary sovereign's tomb. His vision was shrouded by a layer of mist, which covered time and space. Even the netherworld's sacred eyes couldn't see anything clearly, because the rules here had been completely changed. Heaven and earth were reversed, yin and yang repelled each other, and the 5 elements were reversed. Not to mention Yi Chen, even ordinary sovereigns wouldn't be able to see anything if they came here. Since he was already here, he might as well take things as they came. Within the mist, time and space didn't have any meaning. A single step could allow one to travel dozens or even hundreds of light years. Kill. Vaguely, a murderous aura could be felt. Crack. The time and space around Yi Chen instantly cracked like crystals. This murderous aura could even destroy the structure of time and space. What a powerful murderous aura. A crack also appeared on Yi Chen's protective sword energy. In the 3 realms, there's nothing that can't be killed. Kill. Whoosh. The time and space around Yi Chen completely shattered. Time no longer existed, and space no longer existed. Yi Chen could even feel his life energy weakening. 3 realms. Could it be the 3 realms of heaven, earth, and human? Heaven and earth represented the universe, the firmament, and the universe. Human represented life and all sorts of possibilities. In an instant, Yi Chen knew the identity of the owner of the murderous aura. The sovereign of the 3 realms. One of the 7 sovereigns in the history of the human race. These 7 sovereigns were the sovereigns closest to the true God realm. The strength of the sovereign of the 3 realms was unimaginable. His 3 realms killing fist was said to be able to annihilate and destroy everything. However, this 3 realms killing fist had already transformed from a tangible form into a murderous aura. This murderous aura changed according to the will of the sovereign of the 3 realms. When it was weak, it could only shake one's mind. When it was strong, it could destroy the heavens and earth, creating chaos. Chapter 1257. The killing intent became more and more ferocious. Yi Chen saw stars falling and time flowing in reverse. This killing intent was no longer an ordinary killing intent. It contained the supreme profundities of the universe. Withstanding the killing intent, Yi Chen continued forward. The Paragon's tomb was something that could only be discovered by luck. Even if he couldn't obtain the inheritance of the Paragon of the 3 realms, being able to witness the true 3 realms killing fist was already good enough. This was more useful than cultivating for thousands of years. After all, the martial arts of the Paragon of the 3 realms were created with painstaking effort. Pop, pop. Space-time collapsed as masses of chaotic chi currents were born. The universe was originally evolved from chaos. The 3 realms killing fist could already destroy the universe in a small area, approaching the limits of what the universe could endure. Suddenly, a mass of chaotic chi currents rushed towards Yi Chen. Even with Yi Chen's methods, it was hard for him to evade. The chaotic chi currents had already surpassed spacetime, and there was no possibility of evading. Unless Yi Chen's cultivation was comparable to the paragon of the three realms. The chaotic qi currents didn't annihilate Yi Chen's body and soul. Yi Chen entered a different space. Within this space was a vast sea of stars, as well as a white-robed, white-browed middle-aged man. The three realms killing fist is the fusion of three supreme fist arts. In order, they are the heaven killing fist, the earth killing fist, and the mortal killing fist. The heaven killing fist is ethereal and formless. From tangible to intangible, it's all within a single thought. Take this. The middle-aged man didn't move, but his fist had already punched towards Yi Chen, as though he was using his own aura to attack. What was tangible? What was intangible? Everyone could understand the surface meaning, but not many could understand the deeper meaning. From Yi Chen's perspective, tangible meant that everything had to be done according to the rules. Intangible meant that it transcended the rules. But seriously speaking, there was no clear boundary between tangible and intangible. It all depended on one's heart. Therefore, the heaven-killing fist should be the power of the heart. The power of the heart could be strong or weak, and it was extremely strange to deal with it. Just like the middle-aged man, Yi Chen didn't move and started to counterattack. He counterattacked with his heart. What he thought in his heart would become reality here. In the outside world, Yi Chen didn't dare to do this because he couldn't do it. Boom, 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 without any signs, countless explosions occurred between the two. The invisible battle had already begun. There was no concept of time in the alternate dimension. The two of them fought for an unknown period of time, and the sound of explosions gradually slowed down. You are worth teaching. Your heart is strong enough. Pass. The middle-aged man smiled faintly. His figure flickered, and a door appeared where he had been standing. Thank you for your guidance. Yi Chen entered the gate. The scene before Xiao Chen's eyes changed. It was no longer a vast sea of stars but a boundless chaotic land. Standing on the ground, Xiao Chen could sense the boundless power of the earth, able to bear everything. Earth realm killing fist, boundless chaos, boundless power, the pinnacle of power, the essence of the earth realm killing fist. There are no variations, it is purely based on power. The middle-aged man appeared again and said to Yi Chen. Yi Chen fell into deep thought. According to the middle-aged man's words, Yi Chen could roughly guess that the earth realm killing fist contained the profoundness of power. Of course, power was too abstract, and anything that moved had power. Thus, one needed to have enough capacity to contain this power. Out of all the things in the world, the earth was without a doubt the object with the greatest capacity. If one's heart was like the earth, then one would be able to bear all things. Take this. The middle-aged man clenched his right fist and punched out slowly. As this punch struck out, the entire ground seemed to be moving, squeezing towards Yi Chen. There was nowhere for him to hide. 5-element sword art, rise and fall. Facing this punch, Yi Chen could only use his strongest sword art to deal with it. The 5-element sword art's rise and fall were used, reversing the yin and yang and reversing the 5 elements. He tried his best to suppress the aura and power of the opponent's fist art. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Every time they exchanged blows, Yi Chen would take a step back. When the middle-aged man punched 10 times, Yi Chen would take 10 steps back. Too strong. The heaven realm killing fist is the power of the heart. It can be strong or weak. As long as one's heart is strong, one can pass. The earth realm killing fist is the power of heaven and earth. It is the pinnacle of power. If one wants to pass, one must break through the bottleneck. The 11th punch came. Yi Chen mustered up his sword yuan and threw out a sword attack. Boom. The ground was torn apart, and Yi Chen was sent flying. The 12th punch, the 13th punch, the 18th punch, the earth realm killing fist, each punch was stronger than the last. There was no limit to the power, and the earth realm killing fist had no limit. The 19th punch. When the 20th punch came, Yi Chen felt that he was at his weakest. At this time, human strength was so small and not worth mentioning. However, human strength was limited, but mental strength was infinite. 5-element sword art, 5-element cut. His feet deeply rooted in the ground, Yi Chen roared. The flying heaven sword seemed slow, but it was fast as it slashed out. This sword's killing power was extremely terrifying. The 5-colored sword chi slashed across the ground, and the ground immediately collapsed, creating a deep ravine. In the end, it collided with the boundless fist energy. Boom! As if the world was being split open, a cluster of fire burst into the sky, like the first wisp of fire from the beginning of the world. It was so bright and shocking. At the last moment, Yi Chen finally made a breakthrough, and the 5-element sword art advanced to the next level, comprehending the 5-element cut. The 5-element cut integrated the profound of the 5 elements into one sword, and it was controlled by the power of the heart. Without enough heart power, it would be impossible to use this sword. The understanding of the Heaven Realm Killing Fist was being integrated into Yi Chen's sword art. Good sword art, I hope you can continue to pass the human realm. The middle-aged man stepped aside. Through the light door, Yi Chen came to the last checkpoint, the human realm checkpoint. Just like before, the middle-aged man began to introduce the human realm killing fist. The human realm killing fist is unpredictable and extremely dangerous. Watch carefully. The middle-aged man punched out, and layers of fist energy shrouded Yi Chen. Just as Yi Chen was about to counterattack, all the fist energy suddenly merged into one, turning into a huge fist energy that directly attacked Yi Chen. At this time, Yi Chen's reaction was a beat slower, and his sword energy was not raised to the limit, so he was forced to take the attack. Puff! Spurting out a mouthful of blood, Yi Chen's entire person was sent flying out of the sky. The human realm killing fist lies in the word change. If you can't see through this word, you won't have a chance to counterattack. The middle-aged man attacked while explaining the mystery of the human realm killing fist. Change. Yi Chen frowned. In the past, he had always been proud of his fighting skills, but now, he tasted the feeling of being suppressed. Once the opponent used the human realm killing fist, he didn't even have time to react. Every time, he didn't use his strongest power. Under such circumstances, the situation would become even more disadvantageous to him. What is change? Yi Chen began to think. The human realm killing fist was unpredictable and unpredictable. Sometimes, it could even turn the impossible into the possible, and the possible into the impossible. It seemed that even the rules of heaven and earth couldn't restrict the human realm killing fist. The rules of heaven and earth. A light flashed in Yi Chen's mind. That's right, it was the rules of heaven and earth. Chapter 1258. The rules of heaven and earth bound all things. It was invisible, but it was also visible. It was invisible because its existence could not be felt, and it was visible because it could be seen everywhere. For example, the speed limit of the universe was the speed of light. If one wanted to surpass this speed, they could only teleport. However, teleportation was not purely speed. There were signs to it. If one could surpass the speed of light in an intense battle with a strong enemy, they would have the absolute upper hand. After all, once one's speed increased, all aspects affected by speed would be improved. The mortal world killing fist was unpredictable. In terms of transformation, it was no longer bound by the laws of heaven and earth. Of course, this space was originally formed by chaotic air currents, so the laws here were beneficial to the mortal world killing fist. However, who could say for sure that the real mortal world killing fist would be like this? If it was personally executed by the supreme of the three realms, the mortal world killing fist would definitely be millions of times stronger than it was now. If the heavens will capturing hand was the pinnacle of the universe's starry sky transformation, then the mortal world killing fist had vaguely surpassed this pinnacle, advancing towards an even higher level. Deal with the ever-changing by remaining unchanged. In terms of changes, Yi Chen's sword art could never be compared to the mortal realm killing fist. His current achievements in the 5-element sword art were also limited. The sword light shone brightly. Yi Chen suddenly displayed the 5-element sword art's ups and downs. With the use of waxing and waning, the mortal realm killing fist's power and transformations began to decline. However, Yi Chen had still underestimated the danger of the mortal realm-killing fist. A large number of sword lights suddenly broke free from Yi Chen's control and gathered into the mortal realm-killing fist's fist force, causing the mortal realm-killing fist to also have the effect of waxing and waning, which was reflected on Yi Chen. Amazing! Yi Chen sucked in a breath of cold air. The transformations of the human realm-killing fist were indeed beyond his expectations. It could actually transform the special effects of the opponent's martial arts for his own use. Wasn't this also one of the transformations? As a result, Yi Chen's 5 elements sword art immediately collapsed. Hoo! As the wind from the punch blew past, Yi Chen's hair and clothes flew backward and stretched. Strangely, the wind from the punch did not seem to have any power. The middle-aged man stopped attacking. Congratulations, you've passed the test. You can enter the 3-world mountain to receive the legacy. Yi Chen asked, Senior, I didn't pass the human realms checkpoint, why? The middle-aged man smiled and said, even an ordinary prime would not be able to pass through the mortal realms checkpoint. You can also see that this involves the rules of the world. Since you know the crux of it, you have already passed. The 3 realms killing fist had its own advantages. Although the human realm killing fist seemed to be the most difficult to deal with, it was not necessarily the most powerful. The heaven realm killing fist focused on the strength of the heart. As long as the heart was strong, it was enough. The earth realm killing fist was more direct and did not have many changes. It was the source of power. The human realm killing fist was like the world of mortals. It had many changes and could not transcend the world of mortals. Naturally, it was difficult to deal with the human realm killing fist. The 3-boundary mountain was so majestic that it was hard to tell if it was real or fake. Without the middle-aged man leading the way, Yi Chen wouldn't even be able to find the 3-boundary mountain. After passing through the 3-boundary monument and the 3-boundary bridge, Yi Chen arrived at the path leading up the mountain. How much inheritance you can receive will depend on your own comprehension. Life was like a mountain. Everyone started from the bottom. In the Supreme Holy Land, every mountain represented the life of a prime. The 3-boundary mountain represented the life of the prime of the 3 realms. Walking on the path, Yi Chen saw the prime of the 3 realms when he was a child. When he was young, the prime of the 3 realms was completely different from Yi Chen's. The prime of the 3 realms was originally just an ordinary businessman. At a young age, he already had a lot of wealth. But in this world, wealth was no match for absolute power. After becoming penniless, the prime of the 3 realms began to walk the path of a martial artist. Originally, at his age, the path of martial arts basically had no future. But the reality was not like that. With shocking effort and perseverance, he managed to reach the mortal realm at the age of 35, the clasping Yuan realm at the age of 50, the Sea of Souls realm at the age of 100, and the life and death realm at the age of 280. At the life and death realm, the prime of the 3 realms began to stand out, displaying incomparably frightening talent and comprehension. The mortal realm killing fist was created by the prime of the 3 realms at the age of 1000. Then, he created the earth realm killing fist at the age of 2000, the heaven realm killing fist at the age of 5000, and at the age of 10,000, he raised the mortal realm killing fist to a whole new level. At the age of 20,000, he mastered the 3 realms killing fist and became a rare supreme martial art. Evil sovereign, take this. Halfway up the mountain, near the peak, Yi Chen saw the most intense battle. The 2 sides of the battle were the paragons of the 3 realms and a paragon of the evil spirit race. It was obvious that the paragon of the evil spirit race was also an extremely powerful paragon. Although the fist technique he used was not as murderous as that of the paragon of the 3 realms, it was filled with an extreme evil aura. The evil path advocated freedom and did not distinguish between good and evil. Once it was used, the sky was filled with fist shadows against fist shadows. At this stage, even the heavenly Tao was affected and distorted. In the end, the 3 realms killing fist prevailed. It pierced through the layers of fist shadows and heavily injured the evil sovereign. There were a few more battles after that, and each battle was even better than the previous one. This was especially true for the battle against the Devil Race's paragon, the Dark Devil Lord. Both of them were the strongest experts of their respective races. To a certain extent, their strength had already reached or even surpassed the limits of the universe. The paragon of the Three Realms' three-realm killing fist could penetrate anything. No matter how tight the defense was, it would be useless against the Three Realms' killing fist. The Dark Devil Lord's dark primal chaos immeasurable hands had extreme destructive power. The Three Realms' killing fist and the dark primal chaos immeasurable hands were evenly matched. The prime of the Three Realms was struck by the Dark Demon Sovereign's palm, while the Dark Demon Sovereign was struck by the prime of the Three Realms. At the peak, the final battle between the prime of the Three Realms and the Dark Demon Sovereign began. At the final juncture of the battle, the Dark Demon Sovereign broke through his original realm and became an invincible existence below the true god realm, demigod. Although demigods were not true gods, they could still change the rules within their own domain and twist the heavenly Tao. Fortunately, demigods were beginning to be suppressed by the will of the universe. Although their battle prowess had increased by a lot, they were unable to unleash their true divine power. In this battle, the prime of the Three Realms fell. Before his death, the prime of the Three Realms, along with his entire body and soul, turned into a murderous aura that heavily injured the Dark Demon Sovereign. This caused the Dark Demon Sovereign to be expelled to an unknown place by the universe. The murderous aura that the prime of the Three Realms turned into traversed time and space and arrived at the Supreme Holy Land. It turned into a mountain. This mountain was the Three Realms Mountain. So there are still demigods above the Supremes. I wonder if the prime of the Three Realms also used some special methods to enter the ranks of demigods. Demigods, as the name suggested, possessed some of the techniques of true gods. However, they were not true gods. The life experiences of the prime of the Three Realms slowly turned blurry in Yi Chen's mind. In the end, only the essence of the martial arts remained. Ordinary people would not be able to understand these essences. Some were just some symbols, some were lines, and some were just a few words. Those with insufficient comprehension abilities would not even be able to understand them, let alone comprehend them. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.